This is a compilation of over 3 hours of Assassin's Creed Assassins Explained, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with every Assassin's Creed assassin explained and ranked. Every assassin in the Assassin's Creed franchise is a trained killer with ancient bloodlines and weapons that shouldn't exist, but some of them would absolutely destroy the others, and it's not even close. So today, I'm ranking every assassin from weakest to most powerful, starting with someone who saved the world but could barely throw a punch, Desmond Miles. This ranking isn't about who matters most to the story, it's about who would win. And by that metric, Desmond Miles is dead last, which is ironic because the guy literally prevented a solar apocalypse. He achieved temporary godhood through first civilization tech, saved every living thing on Earth, then died. But here's the thing. Before Abstergo grabbed him, Desmond was a bartender. His entire assassin career was sitting in a chair reliving other people's memories. He absorbed their skills through the Animus, sure, but his actual combat experience, almost zero. But at least Desmond had the excuse of being a modern guy thrown into an ancient war. The next assassin had every advantage and still ended up here. Yusuf Tazim. Yusuf Tazim is the kind of guy you genuinely root for, which makes what happens to him that much worse. He's the leader of the Constantinople Brotherhood during Revelations, holding the entire operation together while Byzantine Templars close in from every angle. He's loyal, competent, and one of the few characters who actually seems happy to be doing this work. But the game never lets you forget that Ezio is the real show. Yusuf supports him, coordinates operations around him, and never gets a defining moment that screams this guy is special. Then he gets killed by Byzantine Templars on Prince Amit's orders. His death exists almost entirely to motivate Ezio's final act of rage. He's a good man, a good assassin, and ultimately expendable. But at least Yusuf earned his place through years of service. The next assassin on this list took a considerably more unconventional path to get there. Mary Red. Mary Red disguised herself as a man to fight on pirate vessels in the Caribbean, and she was genuinely terrifying at it. This wasn't some pampered noble playing dress-up. She served as a soldier before she ever set foot on a ship, bringing real combat experience that exceeded many formally trained fighters of her era. In Black Flag, she earns the respect of every pirate and assassin she encounters through sheer tactical thinking and personal bravery. Nobody questions her, nobody second-guesses her. She commands a room the same way she commands a deck. Here's the thing though, the game keeps the camera on Edward. Mary Reed is clearly dangerous, clearly capable, and clearly underserved by screen time. We're left ranking her on what we actually see rather than what she could obviously do, and that gap is frustrating. But if you think limited screen time held her back, wait until you see what Xiao Jun accomplished with even less. Xiao Jun. Xiao Jun was personally trained by Ezio Auditore. Let that sink in for a second. The greatest assassin in Brotherhood history looked at this woman and said, yeah, I'll teach you everything I know. That's not a small detail. That's a direct lineage of knowledge passing from Renaissance Italy to Ming Dynasty China. Her mission was straightforward but brutal. Reclaim the precursor box from the Eight Tigers, a Templar-aligned group embedded deep in Chinese politics. She pulled it off largely alone, operating in hostile territory with zero backup infrastructure. Here's the thing though, her entire story lives inside a side-scrolling spin-off. Chronicles China is a solid game, but it's not exactly the platform for showcasing legendary feats. She goes from Ezio's student to a confident operative dismantling a political conspiracy across China, which is genuinely impressive. But we're left imagining what she could do rather than watching it happen. The potential is enormous. The documentation isn't, but if Xiao Jun suffered from limited screen time, our next assassin had the opposite problem, an entire main entry and still couldn't convince everyone he belonged. Arnaud Dorian. Arnaud Dorian had the French Revolution as his backdrop, which is one of the most dramatic periods in human history. Guillotines, political chaos, an entire nation tearing itself apart. And somehow, Arnaud made it all about a girl. Here's the thing. Arnaud was born into Parisian aristocracy, lost everything to personal tragedy, and stumbled into the Brotherhood looking for answers he never really found. His entire journey is less legendary assassin reshaping history and more guy working through his issues while occasionally stabbing people, which is, not ideal for ranking. He developed solid parkour skills, mastered stealth tactics, and became genuinely competent at navigating revolutionary Paris. but his achievements stayed personal and localized. The French Revolution was right there, and Arnaud treated it like background noise for his redemption arc. But if Arnaud's impact felt small for his setting, the next assassin turned a far more personal fight into something genuinely legendary, A.D. Whale. Most assassins in this franchise stumble into the Brotherhood through revenge or destiny, or some ancient artifact whispering sweet nothings into their brain. A.D. Whale. He just wanted people to stop being enslaved. Pretty solid motivation. He starts as Edward Kenway's first mate on the Jackdaw, essentially the most competent person on that ship, while Edward was busy chasing gold and making questionable life decisions. But Adewale steps out of Kenway's shadow entirely in Freedom Cry, where he launches a one-man war against the Atlantic slave trade in Saint-Domingue. He builds a sanctuary for escaped slaves, coordinates operations against both Templar interests and colonial powers, and does it all while being an absolute monster in combat. Naval warfare, firearms, hand-to-hand, the man does not have a weak point. Here's the thing though, his moral clarity is genuinely rare for this franchise. He's not chasing some glowing orb or untangling a family conspiracy. He's freeing people. That simplicity makes him compelling, but his scope stays Caribbean-focused, which keeps him from climbing higher. Speaking of assassins fighting for liberation in colonial territories, there's another one who took a very different approach, Aveline de Grandpré. Most assassins have one identity. Aveline de Grandpré has three, and that's exactly why she's more dangerous than half the people ranked above her on combat alone. Operating in 18th century Louisiana under Spanish control, Aveline trained under her mentor Agathe and developed something no other assassin in the franchise has ever replicated. She maintained three fully distinct personas: the lady, the slave, and the assassin. Each one gave her access to completely different social circles, completely different locations, and completely different information networks. The lady could walk into a governor's mansion. The slave could move through plantations without a second glance. The assassin could disappear into the bayou like she never existed. Here's the thing. While other assassins are figuring out how to sneak past guards, Aveline is getting invited through the front door. She wins before the fight even starts. And when she does fight, she's combining the liberation of enslaved people with direct strikes against Templar operations, proving her commitment goes way beyond just completing contracts. She's not the strongest fighter on this list, but she might be the smartest. Speaking of assassins who prefer punching first and thinking later, let's talk about Jacob Frye. Jacob Frye. Jacob Frye is the guy who brings brass knuckles to a chess match, and honestly, he makes it work more often than he should. As co-protagonist of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Jacob operates in Victorian London with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. Where his twin sister Evie would spend 3 hours planning the perfect infiltration route, Jacob kicks the front door down and starts swinging. He's reckless, he's loud, and he's having the time of his life doing it. Here's the thing though, he's actually effective. Jacob establishes the Rooks, an entire street gang, and turns them into a legitimate arm of Brotherhood operations across industrial London. That takes charisma you can't fake. People followed this man into fights against Templar interests because he made it look fun, but his ceiling is exactly where his floor is, street level. His strategic impact never extends beyond the block he's currently punching his way through, and splitting every major achievement with Evie means you can never fully credit him for their shared wins. He's the fun twin, not the effective one. But if you think Jacob's lack of long-term strategy holds him back, wait until you meet the pirate who didn't even want to be an assassin, Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway wasn't supposed to be an assassin. He literally stumbled into the Brotherhood by looting a dead man's robes and pretending to be someone he wasn't. Which is, not the most noble origin story. But here's the thing. He didn't just fake it till he made it. He actually made it. Edward started as a pirate motivated entirely by greed. Gold, glory, rum money, bigger ship, zero interest in creeds or ancient wars between secret organizations. But somewhere between establishing Nassau as a free port, coordinating pirate fleets against Templar operations, and mastering both naval warfare and assassination techniques, the man accidentally became one of the most effective assassins the Brotherhood ever produced. His dual pistol combat style alone puts him in a different category. Most assassins get a hidden blade and some parkour training. Edward brought 4 flintlocks, a ship full of cannons, and the tactical mind of someone who'd been outmaneuvering the Royal Navy since Tuesday. He eliminated Templar operatives across the entire Caribbean and reshaped the region's political landscape. No birthright, no mentor handing him a blade at age 12. Just a pirate who stole a costume and became the real thing. But if you think a pirate turned assassin is impressive, wait until you meet the woman who turned Victorian London into her personal chessboard. Evie Frye. Evie Frye is what happens when the Brotherhood actually works as intended. She's not just a fighter, she's a scholar, a tactician, and a genuine believer in what the Creed stands for, which already puts her ahead of about half the people on this list, where her brother Jacob was out brawling with street gangs and improvising his way through missions like a Victorian wrecking ball. Evie was studying Templar networks, building infiltration strategies, and adapting London's own industrial technology into assassination tools. She mastered disguise across every level of London society, from the factory floors to the parlors of Parliament. The woman could walk into any room in the city and belong there, and the results speak for themselves. She dismantled major Templar operations, eliminated high-value targets, and did it all while outnumbered and out-resourced at every turn. But here's what really separates her from Jacob. Evie never lost sight of why she was doing it. She engaged with the Brotherhood's philosophy, resisted the pull of personal ambition, and stayed disciplined when it would have been easier not to. Jacob's a solid assassin, Evie's the better one. But if you think combat skill is what defines a great assassin, wait until you meet someone who proved that wisdom might matter more. Achilles Davenport. Most assassins on this list earn their ranking by being the deadliest person in the room. Achilles Davenport earns his by being the reason other deadly people exist in the first place. Here's the thing about Achilles. He survived the complete destruction of the American Brotherhood during the French and Indian War. The Templars didn't just beat them, they annihilated them, wiped the entire colonial operation off the map, and Achilles, broken and aging, kept the homestead alive for decades as the last ember of everything the Brotherhood had built. But his real power is what he did with those decades of isolation. He became the single repository of every technique, every strategy, every piece of institutional knowledge the colonial Brotherhood ever possessed. And when Connor Kenway showed up at his doorstep, Achilles turned a grieving Mohawk teenager into one of the most formidable assassins the Brotherhood has ever produced. Without Achilles, Connor never learns the Creed, never builds the network, never becomes Connor. That's literally the difference between the American Brotherhood existing and not existing. Could he still fight in his old age? Absolutely. But ranking him purely on combat misses the point. Achilles represents a kind of power the franchise almost never acknowledges. The power of being the person who makes everyone else possible. And speaking of the assassin he made possible, let's talk about the man himself. Connor Kenway. Connor Kenway is raw power given a hood and a tomahawk. Born Ratanhnake.Tun of mixed English and Mohawk heritage, this man was built different from the ground up. Trained under Achilles Davenport, he became arguably the most physically imposing assassin the Brotherhood has ever produced, and his combat style reflects that. Connor doesn't dance around enemies like Ezio, he walks through them. His tomahawk techniques are devastatingly efficient, his firearms handling is precise, and his hand-to-hand combat operates at a level that genuinely exceeds normal human capability. Every fight he's in feels like watching someone who could bench press the entire Continental Army. But here's where it gets interesting. Connor didn't just eliminate a few Templar operatives and call it a day. He systematically dismantled major Templar figures across the colonies, disrupted their operations throughout the entire Revolutionary War, and successfully defended colonial interests while doing it. On top of all that, his connection to First Civilization artifacts, including the Apple of Eden, gives him access to power that goes beyond just hitting things really hard. We're talking reality manipulation territory. Here's the thing though, Connor fights for a revolution that ultimately betrays his people. He wins every battle and still loses the war that actually mattered to him, which is, not ideal, but if Connor's story feels tragic, wait until you meet someone who helped build the Brotherhood from nothing. Aya is the most underrated figure in the entire Assassin's Creed franchise, and it's not even close. She shares a game with Bayek, which means most people think of her as the secondary character, the supporting role, the wife who helps out sometimes. She co-founded the entire Brotherhood. Let me say that again. Every single assassin on this list, every hidden blade, every creed, every bureau, every leap of faith exists because of decisions Aya made during the Ptolemaic period in Alexandria. She didn't just fight alongside Bayek. She sat down and built the organizational framework that would survive for thousands of years. That's not a supporting character, that's an architect. And here's the thing. After establishing the Hidden Ones in Egypt, she didn't retire. She moved operations to Rome and continued directing Brotherhood activities across an entirely different region. Most assassins spend their whole careers in one city. Aya built an international organization. Her power isn't measured in kill counts or combat feats, though she's more than capable in both. Her power is structural. She built the machine. Every assassin ranked above and below her on this list is a product of the system she helped design. That's a form of influence that transcends any individual fight. But if Aya built the Brotherhood's foundation, the next entry on our list represents its evolution into something deadlier and more refined. Naoe is what happens when you strip away every advantage and just leave the craft. No pieces of Eden, no Isu bloodline nonsense, no magical artifacts bending reality in her favor, just a shinobi operating in feudal Japan with a blade, her training, and an almost surgical understanding of how power actually works in the region. And honestly, that's what makes her impressive. She's a pure stealth assassin in the truest sense. Her mobility is exceptional, her infiltration tactics are sophisticated, and her mastery of period-appropriate weaponry means she's not relying on anything she didn't earn through years of disciplined practice. Every kill is manual, every escape is skill. There's no activate the magic apple and win button anywhere in her toolkit. Her targets weren't small either. She eliminated major political and religious figures aligned with Templar interests, disrupting operations that threatened Brotherhood stability across the entire region. That's not easy work when you're operating without supernatural backup. Here's the thing though, being a peak human assassin is genuinely remarkable, but it does create a ceiling. When the assassins above you on this list are literally channeling ancient gods or wielding reality-warping technology, pure craft can only take you so far. She's the best version of what a normal human can be in this world. That's both her greatest strength and her only real limitation. But speaking of feudal Japan, Naoe wasn't the only one making waves during that era. Yasuke. Yasuke is the best pure fighter on this entire list, and I will die on that hill. Here's the thing about every other assassin we've talked about. They're trained in one tradition, one school of combat, one set of techniques refined over years within a single cultural framework. Yasuke has two. He mastered the katana and traditional samurai combat under the Japanese martial establishment during one of the most violent periods of political unification in the country's history. Then he learned Brotherhood assassination methodology on top of that. That's not a fighter, that's a weapon with a philosophy degree. The man went from African warrior to recognized samurai in 16th century Japan, a society not exactly known for handing out that title to outsiders, and then pivoted into assassin work like it was a casual career change. His demonstrated prowess impressed both the Japanese military hierarchy and Brotherhood operations in the region, which is like getting a standing ovation from two audiences who don't even speak the same language. But here's the catch. Yasuke has zero connection to First Civilization artifacts, no supernatural edge, no reality-bending nonsense. Everything he does is rooted in extraordinary but completely mortal skill, which means every assassin ranked above him from this point forward is to some degree cheating. And the first one on that list built an entire Brotherhood from scratch. Bayek. This is where the list stops being about great assassins and starts being about legendary ones. Every assassin we've talked about so far joined something that already existed. Bayek didn't have that luxury, he built it. Bayek of Siwa was a Medjay, one of the last protectors of an ancient Egyptian tradition, and his entire world collapsed when the Order of the Ancients murdered his son Kemu. That's not backstory flavor, that's the inciting incident for the entire Assassin Brotherhood. A father's grief over his dead child became the foundation for an organization that would last thousands of years. Here's what makes Bayek terrifying in the field. The man was a walking armory. Swords, bows, spears, heavy blades. He mastered all of them with the kind of proficiency that let him carve through heavily armored soldiers who should have destroyed him on paper. His tactical instincts meant he was always 3 steps ahead of whoever he was hunting. He systematically dismantled the Order of the Ancients across Egypt, eliminating high-ranking members embedded into every level of Egyptian power. These weren't street-level thugs. These were the people pulling the strings of an entire civilization, and Bayek ripped them out one by one. But the real edge, first civilization technology. Bayek had access to Isu artifacts that enhanced his already ridiculous capabilities into something genuinely supernatural. He turned personal tragedy into a legacy that outlived empires. But the man who perfected what Bayek started, that's a whole different conversation. Altair Ibn La Ahad. This is the one, the original, the character who literally defined what an assassin is in this franchise, and every single entry on this list owes something to him. Altair Ibn La Ahad was born into the Brotherhood and trained from childhood, which meant by the time most people were figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives, he was already one of the most talented operatives the organization had ever produced. But here's the thing, talent without wisdom is just arrogance with a blade, and early Altair had arrogance in bulk. He violated fundamental Brotherhood principles and got himself publicly disgraced. And that disgrace is exactly what makes his arc one of the best in the entire series. The journey from cocky prodigy to enlightened master isn't just character development, it's the philosophical backbone of the franchise. But let's talk about legacy, because this is where Altair separates himself from everyone else on this list. He developed the hidden blade modifications that became standard Brotherhood equipment worldwide. Every assassin after him who flicked their wrist and dropped a target from a handshake. That's Altair's innovation. He didn't just use the tools, he built them. He eliminated Templar operatives across the entire Holy Land, and his understanding of Apple of Eden technology gave him access to power that goes way beyond stabbing people really well. The man literally wrote the codex that future assassins would treat like scripture, but even Altair, the original, has to step aside for the assassin who took everything he built and turned it into a legacy spanning decades and continents, Ezio Auditore da Firenze. This is the one everyone's been waiting for, and honestly, he deserves it. Ezio Auditore is the most comprehensively developed assassin in the entire franchise. 3 full games, decades of service. We watched this man grow from a grieving teenager in Florence with 0 combat training into the undisputed leader of the Assassin Brotherhood across Italy and the Ottoman Empire. No other character in the series gets that kind of arc. Nobody even comes close. Here's what makes Ezio special. He's not just good at one stage of his life. He's exceptional at every single stage. Young Ezio is reckless and raw, but learns fast. Brotherhood Ezio is a tactical genius running an entire organization. Revelations. Ezio is an elderly master who can still dismantle a room full of guards without breaking a sweat. He personally trained Xiao Jun, recovered multiple First Civilization artifacts, and demonstrated limited reality warping capability through Apple manipulation. The man's resume is genuinely absurd, but here's the thing about Ezio that makes this ranking so painful. He's the greatest assassin who is still, fundamentally, human. Everything he accomplished through skill, intelligence, and sheer force of will. No divine bloodline carrying him. No ancient god riding shotgun in his brain. Just a man from Florence who refused to stop fighting. And that's exactly why he's not number 1. Because the 2 above him, there's something else entirely. Basim ibn Ishaq. Every assassin we've talked about so far, no matter how legendary, no matter how skilled, has been human. Basim ibn Ishaq is not. He starts out looking like one. In Assassin's Creed Mirage, he's a conventional assassin operating in 9th century Baghdad. Skilled, sure. Dangerous, absolutely. But nothing that would make you think he belongs in a different conversation than the rest of this list. Then the Loki reveal happens, and everything changes. Basim isn't just an assassin who stumbled onto some Isu tech. He is an Isu entity. Loki's consciousness has been riding through human bodies across multiple lifetimes, using First Civilization reincarnation technology, and Basim is just the latest suit, which is, not ideal for everyone around him. Here's where it gets complicated. Every other assassin on this list operates within the rules. They train, they fight, they die. Basim doesn't play by those rules because he literally exists outside of them. He maintains continuity of consciousness across centuries. He manipulates others through First Civilization technology like they're pieces on a board. And he demonstrates what can only be described as functional immunity to consequences that would destroy any normal assassin. Think about the jump from Ezio to Basim. Ezio represents the absolute peak of human excellence. Decades of training, mastery of artifacts, legendary status earned through blood and sacrifice, Basim skips all of that because he's an ancient god wearing a person. His abilities include reality manipulation and multi-lifetime strategic planning. That's not assassin work. That's something else entirely. But even a god in human skin has competition, and the next entry might actually be able to match him, Ivor. Every assassin on this list is dangerous. Some of them are legendary. A few of them have access to power that shouldn't exist, but Ivor is something else entirely. She's a Viking warrior who can go toe-to-toe with literally anyone on this list in pure combat. We're talking about someone who overwhelms heavily armored opponents through raw strength and speed that borders on superhuman. Axes, shields, swords, fists, it doesn't matter. She will end you with whatever's available. Her martial capability alone puts her in the top tier. But here's the thing. She's not just a Viking. She's the reincarnation of Odin. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Her DNA literally carries the genetic memory of an Isu god, where Basim is Loki's reincarnation playing the long game, manipulating from the shadows. Eivor is Odin reborn on the battlefield. That's not a subtle distinction. That's the difference between a chess player and a wrecking ball that also happens to be excellent at chess. She aided the Hidden Ones in establishing their presence across Viking-era England, eliminated numerous Order of the Ancients members, and helped support the organizational structures that later assassins would inherit. And she did all of this while carrying the genetic memories of a god woven into her very being. The combination of peak warrior capability with reality-shaping Isu power makes her the most powerful assassin the franchise has ever produced. It's not particularly close. Nobody else on this list can match both her raw physical dominance and her connection to forces that literally transcend human understanding. Number 1, and it isn't a conversation. Before the Brotherhood was a brotherhood, it was a grieving Medjay in Egypt with a hidden blade and an unfinished list of names. 2,000 years later, it's a fractured global network barely held together by stubborn ideology, hidden compartments, and grief. In between, the Assassin Brotherhood has lived 100 different lives in 100 different cities, each branch shaped by the language it spoke, the empire it fought, and the local flavor of Templar boot pressing down on its neck. We're walking through the 11 most significant brotherhoods in franchise lore, from the founding Hidden Ones of Ptolemaic Egypt to the dying Russian cell that almost lost it all, the Egyptian Brotherhood. The Egyptian Brotherhood isn't just one of the oldest organized branches, it's the branch. Founded in 49 BCE by Bayek of Siwa, a Medjay grieving the murder of his young son, alongside his wife Aya, who would go on to become Amunet, one of the most legendary names in assassin history. They don't actually call themselves the Brotherhood yet. At this point, they're the Hidden Ones, and the philosophy is still being written in real time. Their 3 rough tenets, stay your blade from the innocent, hide in plain sight, never compromise the Brotherhood, are the original draft of everything the Levantine codifies 12 centuries later. Bayek wasn't trying to start a global secret society. He was trying to kill the men who killed his boy. The Brotherhood just sort of happened around him. Operationally, the Hidden Ones work out of bureaus carved into the rocks of the Sinai and discreet safe houses scattered across Ptolemaic Egypt. The signature tool is the original Hidden Blade, which at this point still requires a finger sacrifice as a mark of commitment, a tradition Altair will eventually abandon and Ezio will make fully optional. Bayek pairs his blade with Senu, his trained eagle, who functions as both aerial reconnaissance and emotional companion. The Hidden Ones favor extreme stealth over open combat, picking apart the Order of the Ancients, the Proto-Templar organization they're built to oppose, one corrupt official at a time. Their golden age is short and brutally efficient. Under Bayek and Amunet, they dismantle most of the Order of the Ancients in Ptolemaic territory, briefly ally with Cleopatra, and then turn against her when she chooses personal power over the principles she promised them. Amunet personally kills her years later in Rome, in one of the most famous off-screen assassinations in franchise lore. The downfall is gradual rather than dramatic. As the Order regroups across the Mediterranean under the rising Roman Empire, the Egyptian branch contracts back into Siwa and the deep desert, eventually fading into legend. By the time of the Crusades, the original Hidden One bureaus survive mostly as architectural templates for the branches that inherit the philosophy, the Levantine Brotherhood. The Levantine Brotherhood is where the franchise actually begins for most people. Altair ibn Lahad, white robes, Masyaf, the year 1191. But the philosophy here is the real innovation. After Al-Mualim's betrayal at the climax of Assassin's Creed 1, Altair spends decades formally codifying the three tenets and writing the Codex, roughly 30 pages of philosophical and technical breakthroughs that will physically travel through Renaissance Italy via Ezio 3 centuries later. This is the branch that turns a regional cult into a global ideology. Operationally, the Levantine Brotherhood is the Hashashin of historical legend. That's where the word assassin actually comes from. They operate from Masyaf, a fortress carved into a mountainside in Syria, and from city bureaus in Acre, Jerusalem, and Damascus. The hidden blade is now standardized without the finger sacrifice, thanks to Altair's modifications, paired with throwing knives, short swords, and the trademark white and red robes that turn them into walking visual icons. Eagle vision, the supernatural Isu-descended sense for reading people and environments, manifests strongly in this generation. They're stealth purists. Open combat is treated as a failure state. Their golden age stretches across Altair's unnaturally long mentorship. He lives to 92, partly thanks to studying the Apple of Eden, and the Brotherhood expands its influence across the Levant and into Asia. They produce some of the most famous assassins in history. Maria Thorpe, a Templar defector turned assassin and Altair's wife, Darum ibn Lahad, their son, and a generation of master tacticians. The downfall is one of the bleakest in the franchise. In 1257, Hulagu Khan's Mongol army sacks Masyaf. Altair, now an old man, seals his codex and his personal apple inside a hidden library beneath the fortress and dies there alone. The library stays sealed for 2.5 centuries until Ezio finds it during the events of Revelations, the Italian Brotherhood. The Italian Brotherhood is the most famous, most celebrated, and arguably most narratively important branch in the entire franchise. Italian assassins have medieval roots stretching back centuries before the Renaissance, but the branch only fully explodes into prominence under the Auditore family lineage, Giovanni, Ezio, and their network of allies across the city-states. The Italian creed leans heavily into humanism. Protect the artists, protect the philosophers, protect the people pushing civilization forward against the Templars trying to lock everything down. Florence, Venice, Forlì, and Rome each become chess squares, and Leonardo da Vinci is essentially the branch's walking research and development department. Operationally, this is the branch that defines what most people picture when they hear the word assassin. Dual hidden blades, the Leonardo-designed hidden gun, poison blades, smoke bombs, the parachute, the crossbow, almost every iconic gadget in the franchise originates here. The signature operational style mixes parkour-heavy mobility with theatrical assassinations staged in crowded city centers. They also pioneer the modern recruitment network. Ezio's Roman Brotherhood operates as an organized cell system, with apprentices working their way up through ranks and being deployed to Spain, France, the Ottoman Empire, and the New World as seed operatives for new branches. Their golden age is Ezio Auditore's full mentorship, which stretches across roughly 40 years and 3 games. The Italian Brotherhood dismantles the Borgia papacy, restores the city-states from Templar control, and lays the operational groundwork for the global network as we know it. Ezio is arguably the most successful mentor in the entire history of the Brotherhood. The downfall comes after his retirement. Without his organizational genius, the Italian Brotherhood gradually softens through the 17th and 18th centuries, and by the era of the French Revolution, it's a shadow of its former self. The Tiber Island hideout in Rome eventually goes dormant. The Italian branch never truly dies, but it never recaptures the Auditore era either. Most modern Italian assassins survive as quiet caretakers of the lineage rather than active operatives. The Ottoman Brotherhood. The Ottoman Brotherhood is the cultural crossroads branch, and it knew it. Operating out of Constantinople in the early 16th century, this is the place where the Italian Renaissance, the Byzantine remnants, the Islamic world, and the trade routes of 3 continents all collide in a single city. The Brotherhood here reflects that. Its members come from every background imaginable: Turkish, Greek, Arab, Italian, North African, and the local philosophy emphasizes adaptability above all else. Stay your blade, sure, but also learn the language of whichever neighborhood you're working in, because Constantinople is functionally 12 cities at once. The signature innovation here is the hook blade, a hidden blade modified with an external hook that lets its assassins zip along the city's countless rooftop wires, vault over guards, and yank enemies into combo finishers. It's a tactical answer to Constantinople's specific geography: dense, vertical, and full of narrow alleys and crowded marketplaces. The Ottoman Brotherhood also pioneers bomb crafting at scale. There are dozens of variants: smoke, shrapnel, blood vials, sticky bombs, datura-laced gas, and they turn alchemy into a fully developed assassin discipline. Yusuf Tazim, the local leader, runs the operation through a network of assassin dens scattered across the city, contested constantly by Byzantine Templar remnants trying to recapture their lost capital. Their golden age is brief but vivid, falling during Ezio's late career visit in 1511. Ezio mentors Yusuf. The two sweep through the Byzantine Templar infrastructure together, and the Brotherhood briefly dominates the city. The downfall, though, comes fast. Yusuf is killed at the Hippodrome by Templar agents shortly before Ezio leaves Constantinople for the final time. The Ottoman Brotherhood survives, but it never quite recovers Yusuf's swagger. As the Ottoman Empire itself stagnates over the following centuries, the local Brotherhood evolves into a more diplomatic and intelligence-focused role, gathering information rather than killing, surviving through patience rather than aggression. The Caribbean Brotherhood. The Caribbean Brotherhood is the wildest, weirdest branch on this list, and that's a genuine compliment. Founded in the early 18th century during the golden age of piracy, this is what happens when you take centuries of polished assassin philosophy and hand it to a bunch of pirates, runaway slaves, and renegades who don't really care about formal hierarchies. The Caribbean Brotherhood operates out of a hidden base at Tulum on the Yucatan coast and a private island called Great Inagua. Its philosophical core is freedom. Not order, not even justice, just freedom. Templars want to fence the world in. The Caribbean Brotherhood wants to keep it wide open. Operationally, this is the only branch in the franchise that fights at sea as a default. Naval warfare, shipboarding, and frigate-to-frigate combat are core skills. Edward Kenway's Jackdaw becomes their flagship. Land combat features 4 pistol rigs, dual hidden blades, cutlasses, and an aggressive blend of buccaneer fighting and assassin technique. The dress code is also a complete break from tradition: fewer hoods, more captain coats, more practical fabrics for tropical weather. Adewale, the freed slave who becomes Edward's quartermaster, eventually rises to master assassin and leads liberation campaigns across the West Indies, freeing thousands from Templar-aligned slave operations. Their golden age peaks under Mentor Atabai, with Edward, Mary Red, and James Kidd as the celebrity operatives. They secure the Observatory, an ISU device that could spy on anyone alive through a single drop of their blood, and keep it out of Templar hands for centuries afterward. The downfall is harsh. The Pirate Republic at Nassau collapses in the early 1720s, taking many of the public-facing assassins with it. Then comes the gut punch. In the 1750s, Shay Cormac, a colonial assassin turned Templar after a catastrophic mission, personally hunts down and kills Adewale in Port-au-Prince. The Caribbean branch never recovers. By Evelyn de Grandprez's era in New Orleans, it's already a memory rather than a living network. The Colonial Brotherhood. The Colonial Brotherhood is the most ideologically conflicted branch on this list. It never quite figured out which side of which war it should be on. Founded properly in the mid-18th century by Achilles Davenport, a Caribbean-born former master assassin who relocated to a homestead in New England, the Colonial Brotherhood operates across North America during the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. Its philosophical foundation is anti-imperial. Any Templar trying to consolidate power across the colonies is a target, regardless of which crown they happen to wear. That neutrality is also why the branch keeps almost dying. You make a lot of enemies when you refuse to pick a side. Operationally, the Colonial Brotherhood adapts hard to wilderness conditions. The tomahawk replaces the traditional short blade, the rope dart becomes standard for tree-based ambushes, and Native American influence runs deep through Connor's generation in particular. Eagle vision merges with traditional Mohawk spirit sense, and many operations work through indigenous communities rather than against them. Pistols, muskets, and frontier-era tradecraft replace urban parkour as the dominant operational style. The Davenport homestead serves as both training ground and refuge, a kind of rural Masyaf hidden in the New England forests. Their golden age is shockingly short, barely 15 years across the 1740s and early 1750s, and it ends in catastrophe. A young assassin named Shay Cormac, sent to retrieve a piece of Eden, witnesses Lisbon get destroyed by an earthquake triggered by the artifact. Convinced the Brotherhood is recklessly mishandling forces it doesn't understand, Shay defects to the Templars and spends the next decade systematically hunting and killing his former comrades. By the end of Rogue, most of the colonial Brotherhood is dead. Achilles is broken, retired, and bitter when Connor finds him in the 1770s. Connor rebuilds the branch from scratch during the Revolution, but the rebuilt version is much smaller, and as Connor learns by AC3's epilogue, the country he helped birth has no real use for his people anyway. The French Brotherhood. The French Brotherhood is the branch that turned a revolution into a chess game. Centered in Paris, operating out of the Café Théâtre and a hidden underground sanctuary, the French branch's philosophy is the most politically literate of any on this list. Where the Levantine Brotherhood was theological and the Italian was humanist, the French Brotherhood reads like a political science department. They debate, they argue, they form factions, they hold internal councils with formal voting. Mirabeau, the mentor at the start of Unity, runs the branch as a kind of revolutionary parliament. Pierre Belec, his rival, thinks revolution should mean tearing the whole thing down and starting fresh. Arnaud Dorian gets caught between them. Operationally, the French Brotherhood pioneers the Phantom Blade, a hidden blade modified to fire short-range projectiles, essentially turning every assassin into a silent ranged threat in the middle of a crowd. They also experiment with the guillotine gun, refined smoke bombs, and various flintlock improvements. The signature operational style is social stealth at maximum density. Paris's Revolution-era crowds are some of the thickest in any game in the franchise, and the French Brotherhood weaponizes them constantly. You don't hide in shadows here, you hide in mobs of angry citizens. Their golden age is the revolution itself. The French Brotherhood identifies Templar Grandmaster François Thomas Germain as the architect behind the Reign of Terror's worst excesses, and ultimately kills him in his own Templar vault beneath the temple. The downfall comes entirely from within. Mirabeau is poisoned by Belec for being too moderate, splitting the Brotherhood between Belec's radicals and the older council. Arnaud eventually kills Belec but is exiled for years afterward. By the time he returns to active duty, the French Brotherhood is bloodied, divided, and exhausted. Napoleon's rise complicates everything further. By the mid-19th century, French assassins survive in pieces but never recover the influence they held during the Revolution itself. The British Brotherhood. The British Brotherhood is the underdog comeback story of this list. By the mid-19th century, the Industrial Revolution, Queen Victoria, gaslight factories, top hats, all of it, the British Brotherhood is essentially extinct. Crawford Starrick's Templars have systematically dismantled it over decades, and what remains is a single safe house running on willpower and tea. Then in 1868, Henry Green, born Jayadeep Mir, son of an Indian master assassin, invites Jacob and Evie Fry down from Crawley to help him take London back. Two twins, one decaying branch, one of the largest cities in the world. Easy. Operationally, the British Brotherhood reinvents itself completely for the industrial era. Kukri-style blades replace traditional short swords. Brass knuckles appear in standard kits. Cane swords let assassins blend in with Victorian gentleman culture while still being lethally armed at all times. The most important innovation is the rope launcher, a wrist-mounted grappling hook that lets assassins zip up buildings and zip line across streets, completely changing the verticality of London-style operations. Jacob favors gang warfare and direct intimidation, building up the Rook's street network as an assassin proxy force. Evie prefers traditional stealth and Piece of Eden recovery. Together, they cover both halves of what the modern Brotherhood needs. Their golden age starts the moment Starrick falls. London is reborn as an assassin-friendly city. The British Brotherhood is rebuilt almost from scratch in under a decade, and the Fry twins become household names in the secret world. By the end of Syndicate, they're advising Queen Victoria directly and pulling discreet strings on imperial policy. The downfall is slower than most on this list. The First World War cracks the British Brotherhood badly. The brief WW1 sequence in Syndicate shows Jacob's granddaughter Lydia Fry fighting alone in occupied London, with most of the branch dead or in hiding. The Templars never quite finish the job, but the 20th century is a long grinding decline that leaves the British Brotherhood significantly diminished by the modern era. The Spanish Brotherhood. The Spanish Brotherhood is the branch built almost entirely in opposition to one specific institution, the Spanish Inquisition. Operating across Andalusia, Castile, and Aragon during the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the Spanish assassins live in the most uniquely terrifying environment of any branch on this list. Every Templar agent has the official backing of the church. Every safe house can be raided by inquisitors with full legal authority, and being identified means not just death, but very public, very theatrical death. The local philosophy reflects that pressure. Spanish assassins emphasize ideological discipline above all else. You don't survive Tomas de Torquemada by improvising. Operationally, the Spanish Brotherhood is the most parkour-heavy of any branch in the franchise. The 2016 film built its entire action style around Aguilar de Nerja's acrobatic mobility through Granada and Seville. Dual hidden blades are standard. The robes are heavier and darker than the Levantine style, designed to blend into the somber dress codes of late medieval Spanish cities. They favor rooftop chases, plaza ambushes, and theatrical escapes, partly out of operational necessity, partly because making the Inquisition look foolish in public is itself a form of psychological warfare against Templar legitimacy. Their golden age centers on the 1490s, with Aguilar as the era's defining figure. He personally protects an apple of Eden from Torquemada, foils multiple attempts to use it to consolidate Templar control over the newly unified Spanish crown, and becomes the symbolic master assassin of the Iberian Peninsula. The downfall is brutal. The Inquisition's purges across the 1490s and early 1500s decimate the Spanish branch, scattering survivors across the Mediterranean and the New World. Many flee to Italy and merge with Ezio's expanding network. Others end up in the Caribbean colonies, seeding what eventually becomes the Caribbean Brotherhood decades later. The Spanish Brotherhood itself survives in fragments through the early modern era, but never reassembles as a single coherent operation. Their diaspora, ironically, builds half the rest of the global network, the Chinese Brotherhood. The Chinese Brotherhood is the longest-lived branch on this list, older than most of the others, with roots stretching back into legendary antiquity. By the time most other branches even show up in the franchise, the Chinese assassins have already lived and died several lifetimes. The branch we get the most direct view of, though, is the early 16th century Ming Dynasty cell, the one that's almost extinct when Xiao Jun, the protagonist of AC Chronicles China, returns home to rebuild it. The Chinese philosophical tradition leans into balance. The Brotherhood isn't here to win. It's here to maintain equilibrium against the Templars' constant pressure toward absolute control. Operationally, the Chinese Brotherhood incorporates martial arts traditions that don't exist in any other branch. Xiao Jun's signature weapon is the rope dart, used as both a ranged tool and a melee multi-tool, alongside a hidden blade and traditional throwing knives. Stealth is the absolute priority. Open combat in the world of Imperial Chinese court politics means you've already failed your assignment. The branch favors infiltration of court eunuch networks, scholar circles, and merchant guilds, anywhere information flows. They also have the unusual distinction of having a documented mentorship line that connects directly back to Ezio Auditore. Xiao Jun trains briefly under Ezio in Italy after fleeing the purge that destroys her generation. The cinematic short Embers shows this final meeting. Ezio's last on-screen mentorship moment in the franchise is essentially handing the future of the Chinese Brotherhood back to the woman who will rebuild it from nothing. Their golden age is what Xiao Jun inherits and then has to dismantle, the Eight Tigers, a Templar-aligned faction of court eunuchs that briefly controlled the Ming court and slaughtered most of the Chinese assassins in a single coordinated purge. Xiao Jun hunts every tiger one by one and rebuilds the branch through sheer attrition. The downfall is cyclical rather than terminal. The Chinese Brotherhood gets purged, rebuilds, gets purged again, rebuilds again, across multiple dynasties, multiple centuries. It survives mostly by being patient enough to outlast whichever empire is currently trying to kill it. The Russian Brotherhood. The Russian Brotherhood is where the entire franchise's modern-day crisis actually begins. Operating across Imperial Russia in the late 19th century and through the chaos of the revolution into the early Soviet era, the Russian branch lives in the bleakest geopolitical environment of any on this list. Tsarist secret police, then Bolshevik secret police, then Stalinist secret police, in unbroken succession across decades. The philosophical core is survival under impossible conditions. The Russian creed reads less like a code and more like a martyr's diary. Operationally, this is the first Brotherhood branch to fully modernize. Industrial-era hidden blades, Mosin-Nagant rifles, Tokarev pistols, gas masks for chemical warfare-era operations. Nikolai Orlov, the protagonist of AC Chronicles, Russia, carries a hidden blade that doubles as an electrocution device, the franchise's first electrified assassin tool. The branch operates from cold climate safehouses across Petrograd, Moscow, and into Siberia. Their tradecraft is heavily intelligence-focused. By this era, they're as much spies as they are assassins. The geopolitics demand it. You cannot parkour through Petrograd in 1918. You can disappear into a factory worker's coat, though. Their golden age, to the extent there is one, is the chaos of 1917 and 1918. The Russian Brotherhood briefly is leveraged during the revolution, recovering pieces of Eden including the staff that ends up tied directly to the Romanov assassination. Then the downfall hits, and it doesn't stop hitting for an entire century. Nikolai Orlov flees Russia with his family. His descendants emigrate west. One of his great-grandsons, Daniel Cross, is born with a Templar-implanted sleeper command buried in his subconscious. A Brotherhood mole prepared decades in advance for one specific purpose. In the year 2000, Daniel Cross activates inside the modern assassin network, locates the global mentor, and kills him. The Templars use the intel from Cross to launch the Great Purge, which nearly exterminates the entire global Brotherhood in one coordinated campaign. By the time Desmond Miles is kidnapped by Abstergo at the start of the franchise, the Brotherhood is essentially in ruins. Everything that happens across the modern day flows directly out of the Russian branch's collapse a century earlier. Every regional triumph plants the seed of the next regional disaster, and the Brotherhood somehow keeps going anyway. Century after century, recruit after recruit, hidden blade after hidden blade. The Templars never quite finish the job. The assassins never quite win. The creed itself just keeps moving from one set of hands to the next, picking up local accents along the way. Not every Assassin's Creed character is created equal. Some are regular humans with a blade and a dream, others are literally reincarnated gods carrying weapons that can rewrite reality. So today I'm ranking 15 of the most powerful characters in the entire franchise, from the most human to the most broken. And we're starting at the very bottom with a guy who's basically just a dude, Arno Dorian. Here's the thing about ranking power in Assassin's Creed. It's not just about who can swing a sword the fastest. It's about Isu DNA, pieces of Eden, and superhuman feats that make you question whether a character even qualifies as mortal. And that's exactly why Arno Dorian is our starting point. Born in 1768, Arno became a master assassin of the French Brotherhood during the Revolution. He's trained, he's lethal, and he's got a rare variation of eagle vision called Eagle Pulse that lets him perceive hidden environmental details most people would walk right past, which is, pretty cool for a party trick. But here's the kicker. He never obtained a piece of Eden. He has 0 confirmed Isu ancestry. Both Abstergo and the Initiates studied his genetic memories and found nothing suggesting he was more than an exceptionally talented human. Arno is elite. But in a franchise where people wield staffs that grant literal immortality, being really good with a hidden blade only gets you so far, but if you think starting at the bottom means things stay grounded, wait until you meet a kunoichi raised by 2 separate warrior traditions at once. Fujibayashi Naoi. Naoi is what happens when you combine 2 of the deadliest traditions in history and put them in one person. Born around 1564 in the middle of Japan's Sengoku period, she was trained as a kunoichi by her father Fujibayashi Nagato, one of Iga's top shinobi. Her mother Tsuyu was a full master assassin, so Naoi inherited both shinobi techniques and Brotherhood traditions before most people learn how to hold a sword properly, and it shows. Her combat style is built entirely around agility and precision, dodging strikes, deflecting attacks into counters, vaulting over enemies to hit them where they can't defend. She's arguably the best pure stealth operative on this entire list. Nobody disappears into shadows better than Naoi. But here's the thing. She has eagle vision, which is great, except hers only works when she's standing still or moving at walking pace. That's like having night vision goggles that turn off every time you jog. It's a genuine handicap that forces her to slow down in situations where other assassins would just keep pushing forward. She also worked to rebuild the Kakushiba Ikki, an entire assassin guild within Japan, which proves she's more than just a blade in the dark. Leadership counts, but stealth and agility can only carry you so far in a power ranking, especially when the next entry has 0 such limitations. Evie Frye. This is where the list starts getting weird. Evie Frye is technically a normal human. No confirmed Isu DNA, no pieces of Eden, no ancient bloodline nonsense. She's just a Victorian-era assassin running around London with her twin brother Jacob, and yet somehow she can crush a man's spine with one arm. Let me explain. Evie's toolkit alone puts her in a different category. Dual hidden blades, cane swords, kukris, voltaic bombs that literally discharge electricity on impact, and a rope launcher that lets her scale buildings like she's got a grappling hook from a Batman movie. She's less stealthy assassin and more one-woman armory, but the gadgets aren't even the impressive part. Evie possesses something called the chameleon ability, which renders her completely invisible as long as she stays still. That's not a skill. That's a superpower. There's no explanation for it. She just does it. Then there's her durability. She tanks visceral stab wounds and regenerates naturally without any medical attention. Her strikes send multiple grown adults flying several meters. She casually snaps bones like she's breaking breadsticks. All of this from a woman with 0 confirmed supernatural heritage. Evie is the point on this list where Assassin's Creed's definition of human starts bending in ways that don't really make sense, which is fine because the next entry threw that definition in the trash entirely. Shay Cormac. Shay Cormac is the franchise's ultimate double agent, and that alone makes him dangerous in ways most assassins aren't. Born in 1731 in New York City, Shay trained as a Colonial Brotherhood assassin under mentor Achilles Davenport before doing something nobody in the series had done before. He defected, switched sides entirely, and became a Master Templar of the Colonial Rite. Here's the thing. Most characters on this list learned 1 playbook. Shay learned 2. He retained every Brotherhood combat technique, every stealth methodology, every parkour instinct, and then layered Templar training on top of it. That's like knowing exactly how a lock works because you built it and then learning how to pick it anyway. By 1752, he'd achieved the rank of captain commanding his own sloop of war, the Morrigan, and was retrieving Isu artifacts, including a precursor box and the Voynich manuscript. The man could fight on land, command a warship at sea, and handle first civilization technology. Not a bad resume. Now Shay's specific ability documentation is thinner than most protagonists on this list, but what we do know paints a picture of someone uniquely versatile. He's unpredictable precisely because he doesn't fight like a Templar or an assassin. He fights like both, and if you're trying to counter someone who knows every trick in your arsenal because he used to be one of you, good luck with that. But if you think dual training is impressive, wait until you meet the pirate who stumbled into the Brotherhood almost by accident, Edward Kenway. Most assassins need years of Brotherhood training before they can even perceive the world differently. Edward Kenway was born with eagle vision and didn't even know what it was. He just thought he was lucky. Here's the thing about Edward. He was never supposed to be an assassin. He was a privateer, a pirate captain, a guy chasing gold and glory across the Caribbean during the golden age of piracy. He stumbled into the Assassin Templar War almost by accident, killed a turncoat assassin named Duncan Walpole, stole his robes, and just kept going. Which is, not the traditional recruitment process, but what makes Edward genuinely impressive is the observatory. This was one of the most dangerous ICU artifacts in the entire series, a device capable of spying on anyone in the world through their blood. Edward found it, secured it, and had the presence of mind to hand it directly to the Brotherhood rather than exploit it for personal gain. That's a massive feat for a guy with 0 formal training. The tragedy is what it cost him. By the time Edward finally committed to the assassin cause, he'd buried nearly every person he cared about. His crew, his friends, his allies. All gone. His natural eagle vision suggests latent genetic potential he never fully unlocked, and you have to wonder what he could have become with proper training from the start. Instead, he got wisdom the hard way, through loss. But if Edward's story is one of wasted potential, the next entry is someone who maximized every advantage she had, Aveline de Grandpré. This is where the list stops being about really skilled humans and starts being about something else entirely. Aveline de Grandpré isn't just another assassin with a blade and a grudge, she's one of the most versatile operatives the Brotherhood has ever produced, and the gap between her and most of her peers is immediately obvious. Despite operating in one of the most hostile environments imaginable, colonial Louisiana, Aveline dominates every situation she walks into. Her combat skills are exceptional across multiple weapon types, from machetes to muskets to her signature sugarcane knife. She's not overpowering people through brute force alone, she's adapting faster than anyone around her can react. Her mobility, reflexes, and tactical awareness are all superior to most assassins, and not by a small margin. But here's the detail that really sells it. Aveline's real weapon isn't a blade at all, it's her persona system. She can seamlessly shift between 3 distinct identities: the assassin, the slave, and the lady, each one granting her access to places and people the others can't touch. Most assassins have one approach: climb, stab, run. Aveline has an entire social toolkit that lets her infiltrate high society ballrooms and slave quarters with equal ease, which is, not ideal for anyone trying to keep secrets from her. She also operates almost entirely independently for long stretches of her career without the support network most Brotherhood members rely on. Strip away the mentor, the bureau, the backup, and Aveline is still dangerous. Most assassins are deadly because of their order. Aveline is deadly because she's Aveline. But if you think a master of disguise and deception is impressive, wait until you see what raw samurai brutality looks like. Yasuke, every Assassin's Creed protagonist, has at least pretended to care about stealth. Yasuke looked at that tradition and said no thanks.
Permit your passage.
He's the franchise's first character built entirely around walking through the front door and making it everyone else's problem, and his ability kit reads like someone accidentally pasted in a fighting game moveset. Impenetrable defense makes him briefly invincible, automatically countering incoming hits for 20 seconds or 5 attacks. So you can literally stand in the middle of a group of enemies, vibing while they break their weapons on you. Brutal assassination lets him one-shot tougher enemies with multiple health bars, a nice reminder that he can be subtle when he wants to, he just doesn't want to. But here's where it gets ridiculous. Late game Yasuke stops being a character and starts being a natural disaster. Eternal Samurai renders him effectively invulnerable while plowing through enemies like a bowling ball through tissue paper. Ultimate Onslaught makes his attacks completely immune to blocking or parrying, which means enemy defense just stops being a concept. You can't guard against this man, you can only accept what's happening. And then there's the combo that breaks everything. Samurai Frenzy extends his powered state by 3 seconds for every kill. So the more people he fights, the longer he stays powered up, which means he kills more people, which means he stays powered up longer. It's a snowball rolling downhill, except the snowball has a katana and 0 chill. Throw in Crushing Shockwave, and you've got a one-man siege engine. In a straight fight, very few characters on this list could survive his late-game toolkit. He's not an assassin, he's a force of nature someone accidentally put in an assassin game. But if raw power without finesse is terrifying, wait until you meet someone who has both in equal measure. Connor Kenway. If you asked the Assassin's Creed community which protagonist would win a bare-knuckle fistfight, no weapons, no gadgets, no pieces of Eden, just raw physical strength, the answer you'd get most often is Connor. And honestly, it's not a controversial pick. Born in 1756 to a Kanien'kehá:ka mother and a British father, Ratan Hanhake Tun grew up in the wilderness of colonial America before being taken under the wing of Achilles Davenport. Achilles trained him at the Colonial Brotherhood's headquarters, turning him into a master assassin with deep proficiency in stealth, swordsmanship, and hand-to-hand combat. But here's the thing. Connor didn't just learn how to fight like an assassin. He fought like a force of nature wearing an assassin's hood. His Kanien'kehá:ka heritage gave him a completely different combat foundation than the European-trained assassins we'd seen before. This wasn't fencing, this wasn't calculated Italian swordplay. Connor fought with a brutality and physicality that made other master assassins look like they were performing choreography. The man could disarm a soldier and break him in half in the same motion, casually, like he was annoyed more than threatened. He's also an ancestor to Desmond Miles through paternal descent, along with Victor Flores Castillo and Noah Kim, so his bloodline carries serious narrative weight across the franchise's timeline. But Connor represents something specific on this list. He's the ceiling of what pure physical power can achieve without Isu artifacts or divine heritage doing the heavy lifting. No apples, no staves, No ancient god living in his subconscious. Just a man who could probably bench press a musket cannon if you asked him nicely, which makes him the perfect segue, because the next entry on this list inherited Connor's bloodline and used it for something far beyond fistfights. Desmond Miles. Desmond Miles is the most frustrating what-if in the entire franchise. Born in 1987, raised on an assassin compound, and descended from basically every legendary killer on this list. Altair, Ezio, Connor, Edward Kenway. His bloodline reads like an all-star roster of people who could ruin your day in under 3 seconds. But Desmond didn't start out as a fighter. He ran away from the Brotherhood at 16, spent years bartending in New York, and got kidnapped by Abstergo Industries in 2012. They shoved him into the Animus as Subject 17 and forced him to relive Altair's genetic memories, which is, not ideal. Here's where it gets interesting though. The Animus had a side effect called the bleeding effect, and it basically broke the rules of what should be possible. Extended exposure to his ancestors' memories didn't just show Desmond what they could do, it literally transferred their abilities into his body. Centuries of assassin training, combat instincts, free running technique, eagle vision, all of it compressed and downloaded into one modern-day bartender like the world's most violent software update. By the end, Desmond could fight trained Abstergo agents with skills he never technically learned. He was carrying the combined muscle memory of history's greatest assassins without spending a single day in a training ring. The man was a walking hard drive of death, and then he died, 25 years old, sacrificed himself to save the world from a solar flare, and that was it. We never got to see what Desmond could become with a full lifetime to develop those abilities. He's the convergence point of the franchise's most powerful bloodlines, and he barely got to use any of it. But if you think unrealized potential is tragic, wait until you meet the man who built the Brotherhood from nothing. Bayek is the origin point. Born around 85 BCE, he was one of Egypt's last Medjay, and alongside his wife Aya, co-founded the Hidden Ones. That's the organization that eventually became the Assassin Brotherhood. Every single assassin that came after him exists because of what he started, and the guy had the toolkit to back it up. First, his eagle vision. Most assassins can tag enemies through walls and call it a day. Bayek could perfectly recreate past events, read a person's true intentions just by touching them, and revisit their actual memories. That's not eagle vision, that's a full forensic investigation happening inside his skull in real time. Then there's the Isu hybrid status. Bayek naturally lacked the neurotransmitters required for pieces of Eden to control his mind. While other characters needed willpower or special training to resist those artifacts, Bayek's brain was just built different. Literally. The mind control signal shows up and his neurons go, no thanks, we don't accept those here. His physical feats are genuinely absurd. The man could outswim crocodiles and hippos underwater, which is not a sentence I expected to write today. He demonstrated extreme pain tolerance to the point of sacrificing entire limbs without flinching. He possessed pressure point strikes capable of knocking opponents unconscious instantly, and a rage mode that amplified his combat output beyond anything a normal human should be capable of. He could also summon and manipulate animals through his eagle Sanu and various tamed wildlife, essentially turning Egypt's ecosystem into a personal army. But here's the thing, Bayek built the foundation for everything. He has the Isu genetics, the versatile eagle vision, the borderline superhuman physicality, but the man who inherited his brotherhood and refined it into something legendary, that's a whole different conversation. Altair ibn Lahad. This is the one who started it all. Born in 1165, Altair ibn Lahad served as mentor of the Levantine Brotherhood from 1191 until his death in 1257. That's 66 years of continuous service. Nobody else in the franchise even comes close to that kind of tenure. But here's the thing. Altair wasn't just a great assassin who happened to live a long time. The Apple of Eden turned him into something else entirely. It didn't just make him stronger, it made him smarter. Through that artifact, he gained superhuman intelligence, weapon mastery far beyond anything that existed in his era, and an intimate knowledge of human pressure, points that let him incapacitate targets with surgical precision. He basically downloaded centuries of combat knowledge directly into his brain, and his physical feats are genuinely ridiculous. Altair could casually defeat multiple enemies wearing full mail armor with his bare hands, not struggling, not barely surviving. Casually, he'd break bones like they were made of chalk, stab through helmeted heads, and rotate them a full 360 degrees, which is, not ideal for the helmet wearer. His raw strength let him toss large crates aside like cardboard boxes, move dense metal containers without breaking a sweat, and overpower armored opponents who had every physical advantage on paper. Just pure Apple-enhanced brutality. But what really separates Altair from the pack isn't just what he could do in a fight, it's what he left behind. His Apple of Eden discoveries and inventions reshaped the entire Brotherhood's capabilities for centuries after his death. He advanced the Order's technology, philosophy, and methodology in ways that every single assassin after him benefited from. He didn't just play the game, he rewrote the rules. And yet somehow there's one assassin who might have taken everything Altair built and elevated it even further. Ezio Auditore da Firenze. There's a reason this man got 3 entire games. Nobody else in the franchise has that. Not Altair, not Cassandra, not Connor. 3 full titles dedicated to watching one person grow from a cocky 17-year-old Florentine nobleman into the most respected mentor the Brotherhood has ever produced. And every single year of that journey earned its place. Ezio was born in 1459 and didn't die until 1524, giving the franchise 65 years of material to pull from. He served as mentor of the Italian Brotherhood from 1503 to 1513, a decade of leadership that reshaped the Order across an entire continent. But here's the thing, Ezio didn't start with any of that. He started as a rich kid who liked girls and fistfights. The transformation from there to Master Assassin wasn't handed to him. It was years of resource building, recruit training, political maneuvering, and continuous skill sharpening that turned him into the complete package. And the Apple of Eden didn't just obey him, it talked to him. Ezio could directly converse with the artifact, an interface capability that almost nobody in the franchise achieves. That level of Isu interaction suggests something deeper running through his blood, something Abstergo clearly noticed, because his genetic material became the cornerstone of their entire Animus project. His bloodline produced Desmond Miles, Clay Kaczmarek, William Miles, and Noah Kim, 4 critical subjects from one man's DNA. That's not a coincidence. That's proof his genetics were among the most potent the Templars ever got their hands on. Where Altair had the Apple's knowledge, Ezio had the Apple's knowledge plus 3 decades of documented peak combat performance, plus organizational leadership that rebuilt the Brotherhood from the ground up. He's the full package: combat, artifact control, legacy, and leadership, all verified across the longest character arc the franchise has ever committed to. But if you think a legendary mentor is impressive, wait until you meet the man carrying an actual god inside his head, Basim Ibn Ishaq. Up until now, every character on this list has been a human, an exceptionally talented, borderline superhuman human, sure, but still a human. Basim Ibn Ishaq is where that stops, because Basim isn't really Basim. He's Loki, wearing a person like a suit. Born around 844 CE in Samara, Basim spent most of his early life thinking he was just a regular hidden one with a talent for killing people, but he kept having these visions. Terrible, vivid hallucinations of a djinn stalking him, tormenting him with images he couldn't explain. Not exactly a restful sleep situation. Turns out those weren't hallucinations at all. They were repressed memories from a literal god trying to wake up inside his skull. Here's what actually happened. Before the Great Catastrophe wiped out the Isu, Loki used the Yggdrasil supercomputer to seed his genetic code directly into humanity's gene pool. He essentially hacked the future of human reproduction to guarantee that one day, a human would be born carrying his consciousness. That human was Basim, which means every moment of Basim's life before his awakening was just Loki's alarm clock slowly going off, and once that alarm finishes, the abilities are genuinely absurd. Shape-shifting into any desired form, teleportation over short distances, electrical generation through his sword, including throwing lightning shards at targets, explosive light ball mines that he just casually stabs out of the ground. He fights like someone who's had thousands of years to get bored of conventional combat. But the real power spike came in 2020 when Basim acquired the staff of Hermes Trismegistus from Layla Hassan. That staff grants biological immortality and regeneration to physical prime. So now you've got a trickster god's consciousness inside an immortal body with shape-shifting, teleportation, and electrical attacks. Cool. That's also a thing that happened. What makes Basim truly dangerous isn't even the abilities, though. It's the patience. Loki engineered his own survival across millennia. He's not a brute, he's a manipulator who happens to have divine power, and that combination is arguably scarier than raw strength alone. But speaking of raw strength combined with divine power, Basim's ancient rival is up next. Eivor Varinsdottir. If Basim is the reincarnation of Loki, then Eivor is the reincarnation of his boss. Literally. Eivor Varinsdottir, the wolf-kissed, Viking shield maiden from Norway, is the human incarnation of Odin. Not a minor god, not some mid-tier deity, the chief of the Aesir, the king of the Norse pantheon, walking around 9th century England picking fights with King Alfred the Great. And here's where the scale of this gets genuinely insane. Before the Great Catastrophe wiped out the Isu civilization entirely, Odin and 7 of his most trusted followers hatched a plan so desperate it borders on delusional. They uploaded their DNA, memories, and consciousnesses into a supercomputer called Yggdrasil, using a catalyst stolen from the Capitoline Triad, gambling everything on the chance that the machine would reincarnate them in future human bodies. The group included Odin, Freya, Tyr, Thor, Sif, Heimdall, Idun, and Freyr. 8 Isu, staring down the literal end of their species, plugging themselves into a machine and hoping for the best. That's not a backup plan. That's a Hail Mary thrown during an earthquake. And Eivor carries the weight of the one who organized it. She possesses eagle vision, confirming a high concentration of Isu DNA, and she inherited millennia of Isu knowledge and capabilities in human form. Not just combat instincts or vague feelings, the actual memories and consciousness of the god who led an entire pantheon. So why does she edge out Basim? Simple hierarchy. Odin outranked Loki. Basim inherited the schemes and cunning of one trickster god. Eivor inherited the leadership, knowledge, and authority of the being who commanded all of them. Loki was clever, Odin was in charge. There's a difference. But even a reborn god has limits, and the character above Eivor doesn't just carry divine blood. She achieved something Odin never could. Cassandra. Cassandra doesn't just top this list, she breaks it. Born as a hybrid with an unusually high concentration of Isu DNA, higher than virtually any other character in the entire franchise, Cassandra was genetically built different from the moment she took her first breath. That alone would make her dangerous. But then you hand her the Spear of Leonidas, a piece of Eden inherited from her maternal grandfather, King Leonidas I of Sparta, and suddenly you've got a demigod running around ancient Greece with superhuman strength, speed, and combat abilities that make every other warrior on the battlefield look like they're moving through wet cement. And she wasn't just swinging a fancy spear around for fun. Cassandra systematically dismantled the cult of Cosmos and purged the Order from Greece entirely. 2 shadow organizations that had been manipulating civilization for generations, and she gutted them both. After that, her father Pythagoras entrusted her with the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, which is, kind of a big deal. Here's the thing about the staff. It grants biological immortality, full stop. It prevents physical aging, possesses instantaneous regenerative functions, and kept Pythagoras alive for decades inside Atlantis without food or water. The man was just standing there in a cave, vibing, sustained entirely by a magic stick. And Cassandra took that staff and has wielded it for over 2,000 years. She was alive before the Roman Empire existed, and she's still walking around. Every single character on this list, she watched them live. She watched them die. She kept going, but it gets even deeper than raw power. Through her son Elpidios, Cassandra's bloodline eventually produced Aya, co-founder of the Hidden Ones. Her DNA literally created the Brotherhood, the entire assassin order that every character on this list either served, fought, or died for traces back to her family tree. No other character in the franchise matches what Cassandra brings to the table. 2 supremely powerful pieces of Eden wielded simultaneously, the highest documented Isu DNA concentration of any protagonist, biological immortality spanning millennia, and a genetic legacy that founded the very organization at the heart of the entire series. She's not number 1 because of one thing. It's the combination. The genetics, the artifacts, and the legacy stacked on top of each other until no one else can even see her from where they're standing. Everyone else on this list is powerful. Cassandra is eternal. Assassin's Creed has one protagonist who lived for 2,000 years, and nobody agrees if she even counts. Cassandra survived until 2018. Ezio rebuilt the Brotherhood. Altair invented modern assassination. But which skills actually matter when ranking the deadliest killers in history? That's why today, I'm ranking the 8 most powerful assassins in the franchise and explaining exactly why they earned their positions, starting with the pirate who shouldn't even be on this list, Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway spent most of his game as a pirate, not an assassin, and that's the exact problem, because he's still considered one of the franchise's deadliest killers despite barely following the creed at all. Black Flag takes place during the golden age of piracy from 1715 to 1722. Edward captains the Jackdaw across the Caribbean. He assassinates Templar Grand Master Laureano de Torres y Ayala in Havana. He kills Bartholomew Roberts, the era's most successful pirate, and seals the Observatory, an ancient Isu surveillance facility that lets you spy on anyone in the world using their blood. He defeats all 5 legendary ships, destroys multiple Caribbean forts, and eventually becomes leader of the British Brotherhood in London. But then you check the actual timeline. Edward doesn't formally join the assassins until after Mary Read dies in prison. That happens near the end of Black Flag. Every single assassination before that moment was motivated by greed, not the creed. The game opens with Edward killing Duncan Walpole, stealing his assassin robes, and impersonating him to collect Templar gold. His infiltration gets multiple real assassins killed because he has zero loyalty to either faction. He's chasing the Observatory for money. When Adewale confronts him about it, Edward literally says he doesn't care about assassins or Templars, he just wants to get rich and return to England. Players have documented that Edward possesses natural eagle vision before any training. That's extremely rare. Most assassins require years to develop it, but Edward just has it. The database entries explain this stems from his ISU DNA lineage, the same bloodline that produces Connor and Haytham Kenway. He can identify targets through walls and track enemies without the Brotherhood teaching him anything. Here's the thing that breaks the assassin ranking logic. Edward operated the Observatory's crystal skull, inserted blood vials, and viewed through any person's eyes in real time across unlimited distances. That's surveillance technology beyond anything the modern Templars achieved. He understood Isu artifacts better than trained assassins who studied them for decades. But Edward's entire Black Flag story is a pirate redemption arc, not an assassin origin story. He doesn't embrace the Creed's philosophy until the final sequences. That contradiction has divided the community for over 10 years. Some fans argue he shouldn't count. Others point to his later leadership of the British Brotherhood and his crucial role in hiding first civilization research that Desmond needed in 2012. Either way, Edward Kenway earned his position through pure skill, not formal training. But if a self-taught pirate dominating through natural talent seems impressive, you'd wait until you meet the master assassin who turned out to be an ancient god trapped in a human body, Basim ibn Ishaq. Basim ibn Ishaq was a master assassin who trained in Baghdad during the golden age of Islam, and that would be impressive enough, except he's actually an ancient god who survived inside a computer simulation for over 1,000 years. Assassin's Creed Mirage shows Basim hunting the Order of the Ancients across Baghdad in 861 CE. He assassinates Al Ghul the Slaver, Admiral Nadir, Zara the Bookburner, and Kabiha, the Order's leader in Mesopotamia. He accidentally kills Caliph al-Mutawakkil, which gets him recruited into the Hidden Ones. He rises to Master Assassin rank, establishes the Constantinople Bureau, and trains Haytham as his personal apprentice. The game positions him as a traditional stealth-focused assassin using classic techniques. But then Valhalla reveals what Basim actually is. He's not just an assassin. He's the reincarnation of Loki, an Isu being from thousands of years before human civilization. His lifelong imaginary friend Nahal wasn't imaginary at all. She was a manifestation of Loki's consciousness slowly consuming his human personality. The Alamut Temple sequence in Mirage shows Basim discovering the Isu prison where Loki was once held. He pieces together memories of his past life. He realizes Odin imprisoned Loki's son Fenrir, and he's been hunting Odin's reincarnation across centuries for revenge. Every action Basim takes in Valhalla is Loki manipulating events to find Eivor, who carries Odin's consciousness. At Yggdrasil in 878 CE, Eivor defeats Basim and traps him inside an Isu simulation. Players assumed he died, but the modern-day sections reveal Basim survived inside that digital prison for 1,142 years. When Layla Hassan released him in 2020 CE, the staff of Hermes Trismegistus restored his physical body to perfect condition. Here's what makes Basim unprecedented in the franchise. He becomes the new modern-day protagonist, not a historical character accessed through the Animus. The actual playable character in the present timeline. He uses the Animus to explore other people's memories while maintaining his own agenda across multiple games. The Mirage developers explicitly describe Basim's combat style as glass cannon. He deals massive damage but can't absorb hits. His assassination techniques prioritize instant kills over sustained combat. That's traditional assassin methodology at its purest, but it's powered by Isu knowledge that no human could naturally possess. Basim's original personality was completely consumed by Loki. The kind street thief from Baghdad who just wanted to find his friend doesn't exist anymore. Only Loki wearing Basim's face remains, pursuing a vendetta that started before human history began. But if an immortal god manipulating the Brotherhood from within seems dangerous, wait until you learn about the warrior who founded the entire organization from nothing, Bayek of Siwa. Bayek of Siwa founded the Hidden Ones in 47 BCE and created the Assassin Creed itself. And despite being the franchise's most important character historically, he deliberately made himself the most forgotten. Bayek hunts the Order of the Ancients across Ptolemaic Egypt. He assassinates Rudjek the Heron in Memphis, Medunamun the Ibis using the Apple of Eden, and Eudoros the Hippo with his first hidden blade kill in Alexandria. He eliminates the scarab, the hyena, the lizard, and the crocodile throughout the Nile Delta. His final target is Flavius Metellus, the lion who he kills in Cyrene's gladiatorial arena. The Curse of the Pharaohs. DLC adds boss battles against 4 resurrected pharaohs, Nefertiti, Akhenaten, Rameses II, and Tutankhamun in the Egyptian afterlife itself. But then you realize what makes Bayek fundamentally different from every other protagonist. He doesn't have eagle vision, he has an actual eagle. Bayek shares a psychic link with his bonded eagle Senu, not metaphorically, literally. He sees through her eyes for reconnaissance. She marks enemies, tracks targets, and scouts locations from the sky, while Bayek controls her perception from the ground. The database entries confirm this ability stems from his Isu DNA, representing the evolutionary precursor to eagle vision that later assassins developed. Origins shows Bayek accessing Isu vaults beneath Siwa's Temple of Amun. He physically travels through 4 versions of the Duat, the Egyptian afterlife, using Piece of Eden technology that transports his consciousness between dimensional planes. These aren't visions or animus glitches. He's walking through actual Isu constructs that survived thousands of years underground. The Hidden Blade's signature ring finger amputation started with Bayek, not as tradition, as an accident. His blade misfired during his first assassination attempt and severed his own finger. Later, assassins interpreted this as intentional sacrifice and adopted it as ritual. Altair eventually abolished the practice centuries later after realizing it was never meant to be permanent. Here's the part that changes everything about Bayek's legacy. He and Aya founded the Hidden Ones together in 47 BCE. They created the core tenets of the creed. The iconic assassin emblem derives from the exact shape Bayek made when he pressed his eagle skull necklace into sand. But while Aya became the legendary Amunet, personally assassinating Cleopatra and earning mentions in every subsequent game, Bayek chose complete anonymity. He signed every letter as the Hidden One rather than his name. He established bureaus across Egypt without taking credit. He deliberately faded into obscurity while his wife's legend endured for 2,000 years. That wasn't a failure. That was embodying the creed's philosophy at its purest level. But if the founder who invented anonymity seems powerful, wait until you discover the warrior who rebuilt the entire Brotherhood from extinction through pure physical dominance. Connor Kenway. Connor Kenway is physically the strongest assassin in franchise history, and SteelSeries Gaming ranks him #1 for raw combat power, but nobody remembers him that way because his story is about failing to save anything that mattered. Connor operated during the American Revolutionary War from 1769 to 1783. He eliminates the entire colonial right of Templars. William Johnson dies at Johnson Hall. John Pitcairn falls at Bunker Hill. Inu and Connor inherits his legendary pistols. Thomas Hickey gets executed with a tomahawk on the gallows in New York. Benjamin Church drowns after Connor sinks his ship. Nicholas Biddle burns aboard the Randolph. Connor's final 2 targets are personal. He kills his own father, Hatham Kenway, in a brutal knife fight, then tracks Charles Lee through burning New York to finish him with a shared drink and a blade. But then you check what Connor actually accomplished. 0. Nothing he fought for survived. Connor rebuilds the Colonial Brotherhood after Shay Cormac's purge destroyed it. He transforms Davenport Homestead from ruins into a thriving assassin community. He participates in the Boston Tea Party, Lexington and Concord, and the Battle of Bunker Hill. He prevents multiple assassination attempts on George Washington, and the entire Revolutionary War happens because Connor enables it, except the Templars won anyway. Charles Lee dies, but the Templar network in America grows stronger after the Revolution. Connor's village gets destroyed. His mother dies in a fire ordered by Washington. His people lose their land. The Homestead community abandons him. By the end of AC3, Connor sits alone on a bench watching a slave auction, realizing everything he sacrificed changed nothing. Connor possesses precognitive eagle sense that shows enemy patrol routes before they happen. He can see past events by examining crime scenes. Juno communicates with him directly through a crystal ball when he's only 13 years old, guiding him to Achilles and eventually eventually to Desmond. The Tyranny of King Washington DLC proves what Connor could do with Piece of Eden power. The apple grants him Wolf Cloak invisibility, Eagle Flight teleportation, and Bear Might ground pounds that shatter formations. His physical strength is documented as superhuman. Connor can break necks with one hand, throw grown men across rooms, and strangle his Templar Grandmaster father while being choked himself. That final fight with Hatham shows Connor winning through pure physical dominance when technique fails. But Connor's greatest weakness is his emotional nature. He trusts Washington before learning Washington ordered the attack that killed his mother. He believes in American ideals that betray him. TV tropes describes him as Juno's unwitting pawn, manipulated into burying the Grand Temple key for Desmond to find. But if a physically dominant warrior failing despite his strength seems tragic, wait until you meet the Viking who rejected godhood to stay human, Eivor Varinsdottir. Eivor Varinsdottir eliminated 45 Order of the Ancients members across England plus 15 Zealot enforcers, and that's the largest body count of any protagonist, except Eivor was never actually an assassin at all. Eivor operated with the Great Heathen Army from 872 to 878 CE, conquering Saxon kingdoms alongside Viking raiders. She defeats the Daughters of Larion, 3 corrupted Isu-powered witches. She wields Excalibur, Mjolnir, Gungnir, and Nodin's Arc, more legendary weapons than any other protagonist carries simultaneously. She establishes Ravensthorpe settlement and helps Hytham build the first Hidden Ones Bureau in England. The Dawn of Ragnarok DLC shows her battling the fire giant Surtur across Muspelheim with godly powers that let her fly, resurrect the dead, and walk through lava. But then you notice how Eivor wears the hidden blade, on top of her wrist, not underneath it. That's not preference. That's because she never learned proper assassin technique. Eivor possesses Odin's sight, an enhanced perception ability beyond standard eagle vision. She experiences constant visions of her past life as Havi, the Isu being Odin, trapped in her genetic memory. These aren't bleeding effect hallucinations. They're an Isu consciousness actively trying to consume her human personality and take control of her body. The game explicitly shows Eivor fighting as a Viking, not an assassin. She charges into open combat with axes and shields. She leads raids on monasteries. She builds a settlement focused on trade and military power, not stealth and information gathering. The gamer states that outside of maybe Cassandra, there's no one comparable to Eivor in terms of raw talent and strength, but that strength comes from Viking warrior training, not Hidden One's methodology. Here's what breaks Eivor's assassin credentials completely. She never formally joins the Hidden Ones, ever. Hytham offers, she refuses. She helps them destroy the Order of the Ancients because their goals align temporarily, but she maintains her identity as a Viking clan leader throughout the entire game. The Yggdrasil confrontation proves Eivor's true power. Basim reveals himself as Loki and attacks. Eivor defeats him in combat, then faces a mental battle against Odin's personality, attempting to override her consciousness. The game presents a choice. Pick up the axe and become Odin, or walk away and stay Eivor. Canonically, she rejects godhood. She chooses to remain human rather than accept the power and immortality Odin offers. That decision makes Eivor weaker in raw power, but stronger in identity. She died around 889 CE in Vinland, North America, where she lived among the Kanien'kehá:ka people. Her body gets discovered centuries later by modern-day assassins. But if a Viking who rejected Isu power to stay human seems strong-willed, wait until you meet the assassin who spent his entire life enslaved to Isu technology he couldn't escape, Altair. Altair possessed the Apple of Eden for 66 years, longer than any other character in the franchise. And that single artifact let him rewrite the entire Assassin Brotherhood from a regional cult into the global organization that still exists in modern day. The original Assassin's Creed shows Altair hunting 9 Templars across the Holy Land in 1191, Tamir the merchant in Damascus, Garnier de Naplouse at Acres Hospital, Talal the slave trader, Abul Nuqud in Jerusalem, William of Montferrat, Majd Addin the regent, Jubair al-Hakim who burns books, Sibrand the paranoid Teutonic knight, Grand Master Robert de Sablé at Arsuf. Every assassination follows the same pattern: infiltrate, eliminate, escape. Then Altair discovers his mentor Al-Mualim orchestrated everything to claim the apple for himself, but then you realize what the apple actually did to Altair's mind for 6 decades straight. Al-Mualim uses the apple to create perfect illusions of all 9 Templars Altair killed, not visions, physical manifestations that attack simultaneously while Al-Mualim himself becomes invisible. Altair defeats them by using eagle vision to distinguish reality from illusion, then kills Al-Mualim in 1191. He becomes mentor of the Levantine Brotherhood at age 25 and immediately starts using the apple for research instead of combat. Revelation shows what happened next. Altair spent decades accessing Isu knowledge through the apple. He redesigned the hidden blade to include poison delivery and eliminate the ring finger sacrifice requirement. He created the hidden gun, arranged a assassination tool centuries ahead of its time. He developed dual blade techniques. Every innovation recorded in his codex came from Apple-enhanced understanding of mechanics and engineering that shouldn't be possible in medieval society. The Apple showed Altair a global map of every piece of Eden on Earth. He traveled to Mongolia and assassinated Genghis Khan in 1227 using information the artifact provided, but the Apple's influence created problems. Altair became obsessed with its power. His absence during Abbas's coup from 1217 to 1227 resulted in his son Sef's murder and his wife Maria's death. When he returned, he was 82 years old and had to kill Abbas Sophian to reclaim Brotherhood leadership. Here's the part that proves Altair's dependence on the artifact. At age 92, during Mashiaf's final Mongol siege in 1257, Altair used the apple to kill soldiers remotely. He then seals himself and the apple inside the Mashiaf library using a vault key only his descendants can open. His final act is using the apple one last time to create memory seals, recordings of his most important moments stored in artifacts that Ezio discovers 300 years later. The AC3 database describes Altair as one of the best fighters in assassin history, but his reforms changed the Brotherhood more than his combat skills. He abolished public assassinations in favor of stealth. He spread assassin guilds across Europe and Asia. His codex became the foundational text for every subsequent generation. Ezio's entire storyline in AC2 revolves around collecting codex pages to unlock the Vatican Vault. But if 66 years with the apple transformed one man into a legend, you wait until you meet the assassin who mastered 2 pieces of Eden simultaneously and trained the deadliest generation the Brotherhood ever produced, Ezio Auditore. Ezio Auditore fought for 40 years straight across 3 games and an entire lifetime, and after all that time, the community still considers him the definitive assassin that every other protagonist gets measured against. Assassin's Creed 2 starts with Ezio watching his father and brothers hang in Florence in 1476. He spends the next 3 decades hunting Templars across Italy. He assassinates Rodrigo Borgia, who becomes Pope Alexander VI in the Vatican Vault. He threw Cesare Borgia from Viana castle walls in 1507. He destroys 12 Borgia towers throughout Rome and systematically liberates the city district by district. His Brotherhood shows him rebuilding the Roman assassins after Monteriggioni falls. Revelations follows him to Constantinople at age 52, still fighting Templars while uncovering Altair's secrets. But then you check what Ezio actually accomplished beyond his kill count. He didn't just hunt Templars, he created the infrastructure that kept the Brotherhood alive for centuries. Ezio gets promoted to mentor of the Italian Brotherhood in 1503. He recruits and trains an entire generation of assassins. He sends them on missions across Europe. Players literally manage this system in Brotherhood, building a network that operates independently while Ezio handles high-value targets. His final student is Xiao Jun, whose Chinese Brotherhood survives for centuries after his death. The AC2 database states enemies panic at Ezio's mere presence. That's not hyperbole. Guards flee when they recognize him. Templars abandon positions rather than face him. By Brotherhood, his reputation alone functions as psychological warfare. Ezio possessed Eagle Sense, the most advanced natural eagle vision variant documented in the franchise. He tracks targets through phantom trails showing their past movements. He reconstructs entire crime scenes by examining evidence. He predicts enemy attacks before they happen. No other protagonist demonstrates this level of sensory enhancement without Piece of Eden assistance. Here's what makes Ezio unprecedented. During the Vatican confrontation in 1499, he simultaneously wielded the Apple of Eden and the Papal Staff against Rodrigo Borgia, 2 pieces of Eden at once. The Apple projects illusions and controls minds. The staff enhances physical abilities and deflects attacks. Ezio masters both artifacts in combat while fighting a Templar Grandmaster who spent decades studying them. Then in 1507, Ezio uses the apple to instantly wipe out an entire Borgia army. Not metaphorically, the game shows hundreds of soldiers collapsing simultaneously as the apple's energy wave hits them. His greatest achievement happens in the Vatican Vault beneath Rome. Ezio becomes the first human in millennia to receive a direct message from the Isu. Minerva appears as a hologram and speaks, except she's not talking to Ezio. She's talking to Desmond Miles through Ezio, using him as a conduit across 500 years. Ezio's reaction defines his character completely. He accepts that he lived his entire life as a messenger for someone he'll never meet. But if a 40-year career mastering every assassin technique seems legendary, wait until you meet the warrior who never technically joined the Brotherhood but lived longer than every other protagonist combined. Cassandra. Cassandra survived from 431 BCE to 2018 CE using the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, and after 2,476 years of protecting humanity, she explicitly states in Valhalla that she's not a hidden one, which means the franchise's most powerful character technically isn't an assassin at all. Assassin's Creed Odyssey shows Cassandra eliminating all 44 members of the Cult of Cosmos across ancient Greece during the Peloponnesian War. She kills 7 sages, infiltrates the Olympic Games to assassinate Elpenor, murders the ghost of Cosmos Aspasia in Athens, and destroys the conspiracy that controlled Greek civilization for decades. Then the game adds mythological boss battles that would annihilate every other protagonist. The Minotaur in Knossos' Labyrinth, Medusa in the Petrified Temple on Lesbos, 3 separate Cyclops, the Sphinx. These aren't metaphors or visions, they're actual Isu-created creatures that Cassandra kills in direct combat. But then you check her actual abilities, and nothing makes sense with established franchise rules. The Spear of Leonidas grants powers no other character possesses. Rush Assassination chains 4 instant kills without breaking stealth. Hero Strike deals full assassin damage in open combat, ignoring the usual stealth requirement. Sparta Kick sends enemies flying with 250% warrior damage. Battle Cry of Ares provides 20 seconds of enhanced damage with temporary invulnerability. Ubisoft developers compared the spear to having an Apple of Eden equipped from the start of the game. After sealing Atlantis, Cassandra receives the Staff of Hermes Trismegistus from Pythagoras. The staff grants complete biological immortality, not slow aging, not extended lifespan, 0 aging. Cassandra remains exactly as she was in 422 BCE for the next 2,440 years. The Atlantis DLC shows her meeting actual Isu beings. Persephone, Hades, and Poseidon appear as physical entities, not holograms or memories. She masters the staff's civilization-destroying potential by exploring simulations of their domains. The game explicitly demonstrates that Cassandra understands Isu technology better than any modern scientist. Her son Elpidios becomes the ancestor of Aya, who co-founds the Hidden Ones with Bayek in 47 BCE. That means Cassandra's bloodline created the Assassin Brotherhood 400 years after she started her mission, but Cassandra herself never joins. The Valhalla crossover. A fated encounter shows her meeting Eivor in 878 CE. She explicitly states, "I'm not a Hidden One, but I have friends that are." Here's what makes Cassandra's exclusion from assassin rankings controversial. Creative director Jonathan Dumont confirmed she remains alive during AC Shadows, set around 1579 CE. She's still out there during Ezio's lifetime, Altair's reforms, Bayek's founding, and Connor's revolution. She watches the Brotherhood rise, splinter, and rebuild across 2,000 years, while hunting dangerous artifacts the assassins don't even know exist. Her final appearance shows her in 2018 wearing a tuxedo in modern Atlantis, handing the staff to Layla Hassan before finally dying after 2,476 years of service. That's longer than every other protagonist's lifespan combined, multiplied by 10. But these aren't 8 isolated legends. Every single one of them connects to something bigger, something that changes everything we thought we knew about what makes an assassin powerful. Every Assassin's Creed protagonist has a hidden blade. Most of them have something else too. Isu DNA, ancient artifacts, literal god consciousness living inside their skull, but not all of them got the memo. So today we're ranking every single protagonist from weakest to strongest, and trust me, the gap between the bottom and the top is absolutely insane. Starting with the one guy who showed up to a supernatural arms race with a fancy crossbow, Arnaud Dorian. Arnaud Dorian is not a bad assassin. He's a master assassin of the French Brotherhood, active during the Revolution, and his stealth game is genuinely elite. The man used the Phantom Blade, a miniaturized silent crossbow mechanism that had been standard issue among French assassins for decades. He didn't invent it, but he was deadly with it. But here's the thing, compared to the rest of this list, he's running on fumes. He technically got his hands on a couple of pieces of Eden, a damaged sword and an apple, but neither one defined him. The sword was broken, the apple was a plot device he handled rather than mastered. His actual combat effectiveness comes down to conventional weapons, poison, and being really good at reading the environment. He's the closest thing to a baseline human assassin at the top of their craft. Technically brilliant, tactically sound, and still outgunned by literally everyone above him. Think of Arnaud as the measuring stick. And the next one? He's got fists, a bad attitude, and Victorian London's entire criminal underworld behind him. Jacob Frye. Jacob Frye is what happens when you give a master assassin the personality of a guy who starts bar fights for fun. Trained from a young age by his father Ethan, Jacob looked at those teachings and said, "Nah, I'm good," before immediately running off to punch someone through a wall. Where Arnaud relied on precision and finesse, Jacob chose violence. His entire combat philosophy boiled down to hitting things harder and faster until they stopped moving. And honestly, it worked. His skill tree spread across 53 unique abilities covering combat, stealth, and ecosystem categories, which sounds impressive until you realize every single one of them is still bound by regular human physiology. Here's the thing. Jacob could chain devastating multi-kill attacks against entire groups of enemies. He excelled at turning a 1 versus 6 scenario into a 1 versus 0 scenario in about 4 seconds. That kind of aggressive combat output edges him past Arno, who'd still be lining up the perfect angle while Jacob's already finished the job and gone gambling. But 0 Isu DNA, 0 pieces of Eden, 0 supernatural anything. His entire power set is punching really hard, which is fun, but it hits the exact same ceiling as Arno. He's just louder about it. And if you think being loud is a problem, wait until you meet someone who switched sides entirely. Shay Cormac. Shay is the wild card of this franchise, a former assassin who defected to the Templars and spent 16 years mastering both sides of the war. He trained under the Colonial Brotherhood, learned every trick they had, then flipped and absorbed everything the Templar Order could teach him. Dual faction training, 0 loyalty discounts. His arsenal reflects that. Dual hidden blades, swords, paired flintlock pistols, rope darts, grenades, and the crown jewel, the air rifle. This thing used compressed air to fire projectiles in complete silence. No gunpowder, no bang, no alert. Functionally superior to every contemporary firearm for stealth operations, and one of the most underrated weapons in the series. But here's the thing. Shay retrieved multiple ICU artifacts during his Templar career, including the Precursor Box and the Voynich manuscript. Sounds impressive until you realize he never actually wielded any of them. He was essentially a very dangerous delivery man, collecting god-tier technology he couldn't personally access. His edge comes entirely from dual faction training and technological innovation. No Isu DNA advantages, no piece of Eden combat buffs. Just a man who stole the best tricks from both sides and built a better gun. The most dangerous, purely human operative in the franchise, which is a compliment and a ceiling at the same time. But if Shay represents the peak of human versatility, the next entry shows what happens when you pair that discipline with something supernatural. Evie Fry. There's an argument that the best fighter isn't the one who hits hardest. It's the one you can't hit at all. Evie Fry is that argument in human form. While her brother Jacob was brawling through Victorian London like a pub regular with a death wish, Evie actually took their father's training seriously. She built a combat philosophy around control and precision rather than just punching really hard and hoping for the best. Her abilities reflect that. Knife Master gave her throwing range Jacob couldn't match. Voltaic bombs let her stun entire groups, but the real showstopper is Chameleon. Hood up, stand still, and Evie becomes functionally invisible. Not hard to see. Invisible. That's a tactical advantage most protagonists in this franchise would trade half their arsenal for. She also pursued the Shroud of Eden, which tells you she understood what tier of power existed above her. She never wielded it, only recovered it for Brotherhood safekeeping, but the awareness alone puts her ahead of assassins who never engaged with Isu technology. Her edge over Shay comes down to one thing. You can't fight what you can't find. Shay had the gadgets, the experience, the dual training, but Evie could disappear and end you before you knew she was there. But if stealth and deception separate good assassins from great ones, wait until you meet the woman who turned social manipulation into an entire combat system, Aveline de Grandpré. Now we're getting into different territory. Every assassin we've talked about so far has been purely human. Talented, sure. Dangerous, absolutely, but human. Aveline de Grandpré is the first protagonist on this list with confirmed Isu DNA, and that changes the conversation entirely. As a member of the Louisiana Brotherhood in the mid to late 1700s, Aveline had eagle vision and enhanced perception that the previous 4 simply could not match. But here's the thing. Her real power wasn't the supernatural stuff. It was the fact that she could become 3 completely different people. Aveline mastered 3 distinct personas: the assassin, the slave, and the noblewoman. She could walk into a plantation as a submissive slave and nobody would look twice. She could charm her way through an aristocratic gala as a wealthy socialite. Then she could vanish into the bayou and gut a Templar before dinner. That's not combat power. That's operational access that every other assassin on this list would kill for. By 1784, she'd refined her eagle vision to the point where she could tag and track individuals through walls without even actively using the ability. That's perception on par with Edward Kenway's most sophisticated feats. But despite the Esu blood, Aveline never wielded a single piece of Eden. Her ceiling was defined entirely by social engineering and tactical adaptation. Dangerous, versatile, genuinely unique, but ultimately limited compared to someone who got their hands on actual Isu technology. Speaking of which, let's talk about a pirate who stumbled into way more than he bargained for. Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway is the best pure human fighter on this list, and I will die on that hill. This guy was a Welsh privateer who stumbled into the Assassin Brotherhood almost by accident, spent years as a pirate in the Caribbean, and somehow came out the other side as one of the most weapon-diverse combatants the franchise has ever seen. He dual-wielded hidden blades alongside 2 swords, carried multiple pistols, rope darts, and various cutlasses. The man was basically a walking armory with a drinking problem. And here's the thing, he earned every bit of it through experience. No pieces of Eden, no Isu DNA giving him a secret edge, just years of pirate warfare, naval combat, and eventually formal Brotherhood training stacking on top of each other until he could dismantle Templar operatives across the entire Caribbean like it was a hobby. But Edward's story isn't just about combat. He lost nearly every single person he cared about because he was too busy chasing personal glory to notice them dying around him. By the time he finally woke up and committed to the Brotherhood, entrusting the Observatory and Great Inagua to the Assassins, he'd already paid a price most protagonists never have to. He edges above Aveline through sheer combat versatility alone, but he's still capped at human limits, which is exactly why the next entry is interesting, because Naoi brings an entirely different combat philosophy to the table. Naoi. Every protagonist on this list trained within some version of the Assassin Brotherhood's Western traditions. Naoi didn't. She came from an entirely separate combat lineage, the Fujibayashi Shinobi clan, operating during Japan's Sengoku period, and that distinction matters more than you'd think. Her weapon loadout alone sets her apart. Kusarigama, katana, tanto, and a full suite of specialized shinobi tools. But the real story is her skill tree. 6 full masteries spanning katana, kusarigama, hidden blade and tanto, tools, shinobi, and assassin. That's Eastern and Western combat philosophy smashed together into one fighter. Nobody else on this list has that kind of cross-discipline coverage. But here's where it gets interesting. Her Kusarigama bleed builds are genuinely terrifying. We're talking instant bleed application through entanglement, area of effect damage spreading to entire groups, and health regeneration through lifesteal that keeps her alive while everything around her slowly dies. The Bloodletter build specifically turns her into a pseudo-ranged nightmare, shredding posture from mid-range while enemies bleed out before they can close the gap. It's sophisticated damage scaling that creates a combat profile most protagonists simply can't answer. Now she has 0 confirmed pieces of Eden, no Isu DNA advantages. Everything she does comes from technologically superior Japanese weaponry and centuries of refined shinobi combat systems. That's it, which is honestly kind of impressive on its own. She edges past Edward because her specialization creates a more devastating combat identity than his pirate versatility ever could. But raw shinobi skill only takes you so far, when the next guy on this list could probably bench press a horse. Connor Kenway is the guy in this franchise that makes you go, oh, he's actually just built different. And I mean that literally. Raden Hanake-tan, his Kanyenkeha Ka birth name, is arguably the most physically imposing protagonist the series has ever produced. Taller than almost every other assassin on this list, with a frame that translates directly into melee combat dominance through sheer leverage and reach. Here's the thing, most assassins rely on blades, gadgets, or supernatural artifacts to get the job done. Connor just suplexes people, full wrestling moves, drop kicks. He fought entire squadrons of British soldiers unarmed and won using techniques that belong in a WWE ring, not the American Revolution. His combat animations had enemies literally flying backward from his strikes, not stumbling, flying. Visually, he's the most devastating melee combatant this franchise has ever animated. Now, the Tyranny of King Washington DLC did give him access to supernatural powers. The bear granted him raw strength and fury. The eagle and the wolf added mobility and pack tactics. Warpaint, alpha of the pack, the whole thing. For a brief window, Connor was operating on a completely different level. But here's the kicker. Those powers only existed in an alternate reality. They're not canon. Strip all of that away, and Connor is still the strongest human on this list. operating on nothing but muscle, training, and the kind of physicality that made redcoats ragdoll across battlefields. He's the undisputed physical powerhouse. But physical strength has a ceiling. And the next entry on this list, he started pushing past human limits a very, very long time ago. Altair Ibn Lahad. This is where the list stops being about who hits hardest and starts being about who changed everything. Altair became a master assassin at 24 years old. That's not just impressive, that's historically unprecedented within the order. Nobody had done it that young before, and he didn't slow down from there. He served as mentor of the Levantine Brotherhood from 1191 until his death in 1257. That's 66 years of continuous leadership. And during that time, he transformed the Assassins from a regional operation into an international organization spanning Europe and Asia. But here's the thing, Altair's real weapon was never a blade. It was the Apple of Eden, and unlike other protagonists who used pieces of Eden to punch harder or mind control people, Altair used his to gain knowledge. The apple granted him extrasensory perception, retrocognition, and psychometry, meaning he could literally revisit past events with perfect clarity and recreate prior occurrences. He used that information to pioneer the Brotherhood's fundamental tools and techniques. Every hidden blade modification, every tactical doctrine, every organizational structure that later assassins inherited, that traces back to him. And then there's the longevity issue. At 92 years old, Altair retained the same strength, stamina, and combat skill he had in his prime. A 92-year-old man performing like he's 25. That's not discipline. That's not a good diet. That hints at something in his DNA that goes beyond human, and nobody in the lore has fully explained it. He wasn't the strongest fighter on this list. He was the architect. Every protagonist ranked above and below him used tools he built, followed principles he established, and operated within a brotherhood he turned into a global force. His power wasn't personal, it was civilizational. But if Altair built the Brotherhood, the next entry built its very foundation. And he did it with nothing but rage and a broken heart. Bayek. Bayek of Siwa didn't just become an assassin, he literally invented them. Alongside Aya, he co-founded the Hidden Ones, the organization that would eventually evolve into the Assassin Brotherhood itself. Every protagonist on this list owes their entire identity to a grieving father from Egypt, who turned his personal vengeance into a global institution. That alone puts him in a different category. But Bayek wasn't just institutionally important, he was genuinely dangerous. His Medjay training gave him elite Egyptian martial combat proficiency, the kind of warrior discipline that made him effective with virtually any weapon he picked up. And underneath all that training sat something even more valuable, hybrid Isu DNA. This granted him eagle vision and, more importantly, natural immunity to the neurotransmitters that Isu artifacts use to control pure humans. Pieces of Eden that would turn a normal person into a puppet, Bayek could pick them up like paperweights, which is, a pretty significant advantage when your enemies keep waving ancient god technology around. That immunity mattered most during his fight against Flavius Metellus. Flavius was amplified by the Apple of Eden's power, throwing supernatural energy blasts and operating well beyond human limits. Bayek's response to this was essentially I don't care, and he just kept coming. No artifact of his own, no divine power boost, just Medjay stubbornness and a complete disregard for his own physical well-being. The man demonstrated pain tolerance that bordered on clinical, pushing through injuries that would have dropped anyone else twice over. His overpower abilities and adrenaline-fueled combat surges temporarily pushed his effectiveness beyond normal parameters, but honestly, Bayek's real superpower was refusing to die until the job was done. But if you think raw determination and Isu immunity are impressive, wait until you see what a full samurai brings to the table. Yasuke. Yasuke is a wrecking ball with a pulse. There's no other way to describe what this man does on a battlefield. He's not sneaking through shadows or relying on ancient bloodlines to carry him. He's walking straight through the front door with a kanabo the size of a small tree and asking who wants to go first. As the co-protagonist of Assassin's Creed Shadows, Yasuke brings something completely different to this list. He's an outsider, an African samurai operating in Sengoku-era Japan who earned his place through pure combat excellence, not Brotherhood lineage or Isu inheritance. He learned the language, the customs, and the martial arts of an entirely foreign culture, then mastered them well enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with lifelong warriors, which is, slightly impressive. His weapon diversity is genuinely absurd. Katana swordplay forms his foundation, but stack a kanabo on top of that, and you've got a man who can either slice you apart or cave your chest in depending on his mood. Combinations like Rage of the Red Mist and Shade of Blight paired with Vengeful Foe turn individual encounters into something closer to demolition than combat. His hand-to-hand takedowns are brutal, his multi-kill capability rivals anyone on this list, and his entire combat philosophy revolves around one principle: individual warrior excellence supersedes numerical advantage. Here's the thing though. 0 pieces of Eden, no confirmed Isu DNA, nothing supernatural whatsoever. Every single kill Yasuke earns comes from samurai training and raw physical devastation. That's it. And yet his melee output still edges above Bayek's, which is exactly why he sits one spot higher. Bayek had Isu immunity and Medjay resilience. Yasuke just hits harder, but raw devastation only gets you so far when the next name on this list has 3 entire games worth of experience and an apple of Eden in his back pocket. Ezio Auditore da Firenze. Look, you knew he was coming, and you knew he was going to be this high. Ezio Auditore da Firenze is the franchise's golden child, and honestly, he earned it. This is a character who went from a reckless 17-year-old watching his family get hanged to one of the most complete assassins the Brotherhood has ever produced. And he did it across 3 full games, which means he had more time to accumulate power than any single-entry protagonist could dream of. Let's start with the conventional stuff, because even without artifacts, Ezio is terrifying. He pioneered the dual hidden blade technique, allowing him to assassinate 2 targets simultaneously. Just walk up to 2 guys and end both of them before either one processes what's happening. He mastered swords, crossbows, poison darts, smoke bombs, and pressure point strikes precise enough to incapacitate someone through targeted neck hits alone. The man studied human anatomy like it was a hobby, which is, not ideal for anyone standing near him, but here's where it gets genuinely scary. Ezio wielded the Apple of Eden, and when you actually list out what that thing does, it reads like a cheat code. Mind manipulation, fear manipulation, madness manipulation, illusion creation, precognition, paralysis, duplication, healing, and death manipulation. He could literally kill people with a glowing orb. Hey Ezio, what's your weapon? I think at you and you die. Cool. He also combined the apple with the Staff of Eden to enter the vault, an area physically impossible for humans without sufficient Isu DNA concentration. That's not just a flex. That's biological confirmation that Ezio carried hybrid genetics strong enough to interface with first civilization technology. 3 games of growth, the broadest conventional arsenal in the series. An Isu artifact that basically gives you god powers. Ezio is the strongest traditional assassin the franchise has ever seen, but traditional only gets you so far when your next competitor is literally an ancient god wearing a human suit. Basim ibn Ishaq. Basim started his life as a street thief in 9th century Baghdad, a nobody, a pickpocket scraping by during the anarchy at Samarra. He clawed his way into the Hidden Ones, earned the rank of Master, and built a reputation as one of the most capable operatives of his era. And then the twist hit. Basim isn't just Basim, he's the human incarnation of the Isu Loki, who used Yggdrasil to seed his genetic code into humanity's gene pool thousands of years before Basim was ever born. Every memory, every shred of consciousness from one of the most cunning Isu deities to ever exist, all of it was sitting inside this former street rat's head waiting to wake up. His entire journey as a Hidden One, the missions, the Brotherhood loyalty, all of it was surface reality masking an ancient god's agenda. Here's where it gets genuinely terrifying. Once Basim's Loki consciousness fully surfaced, he confronted Eivor, who was Odin's incarnation inside Yggdrasil's chamber. This wasn't a petty grudge. This was vengeance pursued across literal millennia. Loki suffered during the Isu era, and he engineered his own reincarnation specifically to settle that score. That's commitment. But the real power spike came in 2020 when Layla Hassan dropped the staff of Hermes Trismegistus and Basim picked it up. Biological immortality, instantaneous regeneration, full restoration to prime physical condition, the same artifact that kept Cassandra alive for over 2,000 years, now in the hands of a man who is also an Isu god. The catch? His immortality is brand new. He hasn't had centuries to prove what he can do with it, and honestly, his primary motivation isn't even combat dominance. He wants to reunite with his lover Alethea, whose consciousness lives inside the staff, which is almost sweet if you ignore the millennia of scheming it took to get there. But if you think Loki's incarnation is scary, wait until you meet the person he was trying to kill, Eivor Varinsdottir. Most protagonists in this franchise earn their power through training, through artifacts, through bloodlines. Eivor earned hers by literally having a god living inside her head and telling him to shut up. Eivor Varinsdottir, the Wolf-Kissed, was a Viking shield maiden and Jarl Skona, who sailed from Norway to England in the late 9th century. But she wasn't just any Viking raider. She was the human incarnation of Odin, not a descendant, not someone who channeled Odin's energy. She was the actual reincarnation of the chief of the Aesir, the god revered across all of Germanic and Norse mythology, which is, a decent resume. By her 20s, Eivor could wield every available weapon with exceptional proficiency. Axes, spears, greatswords, flails, dual daggers, you name it. That's pure Viking physicality before you even factor in the Isu god rattling around in her brain. Through visions explored with the seeress Valka, Eivor gradually became aware of her Odin incarnation, gaining access to inherited abilities and knowledge spanning millennia. But here's the kicker. She then rejected Odin's direct influence over her mind while keeping the power he left behind. She basically fired God and kept his toolkit. Her achievements in England are staggering. She completely eradicated the Order of the Ancients from the country, not weakened, not disrupted, eradicated. She secured every piece of Eden from hostile acquisition and established the Hidden One's strong English branch that would shape the Brotherhood's future for centuries. And then there's the crossover that tells you exactly where she stands. Eivor encountered the immortal Cassandra and assisted her in retrieving an Apple of Eden from Scotland's Isle of Skye. She fought alongside the franchise's most powerful protagonist, not as an equal, but as a capable ally. That collaboration alone places her in extraordinarily rare company. Eivor is a devastating hybrid warrior, an Isu god's incarnation who chose humanity over divinity and still kept the strength of both. She's the penultimate powerhouse on this list, but there's one person she helped on that Scottish island who stands above everyone, and it's not even close. Cassandra, this is the one. This is the answer. And honestly, it's not even close. Cassandra was born in Sparta in 458 BCE to a bloodline that reads like someone designed it in a lab. Her mother, Marine, was the granddaughter of King Leonidas I, the guy who held the pass at Thermopylae with 300 soldiers against an entire Persian army. Her father was Pythagoras the philosopher, whose lifespan had already been extended by centuries through Isu technology. So on one side, you've got legendary Spartan royalty, and on the other, you've got a mathematically gifted immortal. The result was a child with an unusually high concentration of Isu DNA, higher than virtually any other protagonist in the franchise. And that concentration is what made everything else possible, because Cassandra could wield the spear of Leonidas. Not just carry it, wield it. The spear granted her cloaking, health regeneration, elemental manipulation through poison and fire, temporary boosts to speed and reflexes, explosive arrow charging, shockwave generation, and arrows that literally phased through walls. That's not an assassin. That's a walking natural disaster with a pointy stick, and she used every bit of it. Cassandra systematically identified and eliminated every single member of the Cult of Cosmos across the entire Greek world. Not a chapter, not a cell. The whole organization wiped from existence. One woman dismantled a shadow government that had been pulling strings across Greece for generations. She also killed the Minotaur, Medusa, a Cyclops, and a Sphinx, because apparently mythological creatures were just side quests for her. Cool. Normal Tuesday activities. But here's where she leaves everyone else behind permanently. After reuniting with her father Pythagoras, Cassandra inherited the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, and the staff made her biologically immortal. Not lived a long time immortal, not aged, gracefully immortal. Physically unchanged for over 2,000 years, she walked the earth for 20 centuries, tracking down and securing pieces of Eden across the entire world, while every other protagonist on this list was born, lived, and died. Most of them didn't even make it past 50. Cassandra was just getting warmed up at 50. She was still active during Ivor's story in the 9th century, retrieving an apple of Eden from Scotland's Isle of Skye. That's over 2,300 years after her birth, and she hadn't slowed down one bit. She eventually passed the staff to Layla Hassan in 2018, which means she was operational for roughly 2,476 years. That's longer than most civilizations last. Every other protagonist has one or two advantages. Connor has raw strength. Ivor has Odin's consciousness. Basim has Loki's incarnation. Cassandra has the highest Isu DNA concentration, the most powerful weapon artifact in the spear, biological immortality from the staff, and over 2,000 years of accumulated combat experience. She is, without question, the strongest protagonist Assassin's Creed has ever produced. And at this rate, she's still out there somewhere, which is, mildly terrifying. From a single hidden blade in the Holy Land to Viking longships burning English monasteries, the Assassin's Creed franchise spent over a decade quietly inflating its body counts from surgical precision into full-scale historical warfare. We're breaking down all 12 major protagonists, their canonical kills, their real gameplay carnage, and the massive gap between the two. Let's start where it all began, with 10 targets and a counterkill problem, Altair Ibn la Ahad. Here's the thing about the original Assassin. Altair has exactly 10 canonical kills across the entire Third Crusade, 9 targets, including Robert de Sablé, and then Al-Mualim himself. That's it, 10 people. The poster boy for an entire franchise about killing people has a confirmed body count you can count on your fingers. But let's be honest with ourselves for a second. Nobody played Assassin's Creed 1 and only killed 10 people. The average main story playthrough racks up somewhere between 150 and 300 anonymous guards, and completionists, low thousands. The counter-kill system turned every single player into a frontline swordsman who'd wipe entire garrisons without blinking. The guy whose whole philosophy is stay hidden, strike once, disappear became a medieval blender the moment 3 guards spotted him on a rooftop. And then there's Masyaf. The final assault forces Altair to cut through his own brainwashed assassin brothers to reach Al-Mualim, former allies, friends, people he trained with. That single sequence is the deadliest spike in his personal count, and nobody talks about it. So this is our baseline. 10 surgical kills in canon, hundreds of counter-killed guards in practice, the franchise's founding tension between what an assassin is supposed to be and what the gameplay turns them into. Every single entry after this inherits that contradiction. But Altair's numbers look almost quaint compared to what comes next. Ezio Auditore da Firenze. No other protagonist in this franchise gets 3 full games to hone their craft, 4 decades of active fieldwork. Altair had his redemption arc and retired to philosophy. Ezio just kept killing people across Italy and Constantinople like it was a full-time job, which, to be fair, it was. Between Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations, Ezio racks up somewhere between 20 and 30 named Templar kills, the Pazzi conspirators, the Barbarigo family, Rodrigo Borgia's entire inner circle, Cesare's lieutenants, the Byzantine remnants in Constantinople. His canonical hit list more than doubles Altair's. Here's where it gets complicated. Brotherhood doesn't just make Ezio a killer, it makes him a military commander. He recruits assassins, sends them on missions across Europe, and can call down an arrow volley that wipes an entire patrol off the street. Hey, could you guys murder those 12 soldiers for me? Thanks. The indirect kill count under his command is staggering, but the real body count inflator is the environment itself. The Borgia occupation of Rome means guards on every corner, in every restricted zone, on every rooftop. A completionist run across all 3 games puts Ezio's gameplay body count comfortably in the low thousands. Dual hidden blades, bracer-mounted pistol, poison darts. He can ghost through a mission or chain kill 6 guards in a cinematic execution streak. Most players did both regularly, but if you think Ezio's decades of Italian and Ottoman bloodshed sound excessive, wait until you meet the guy who fought an entire revolution. Connor Kenway. Connor Kenway is the first Assassin's Creed protagonist who's not just involved in a war, he's an actual soldier, and that changes everything about how we count his bodies. On paper, his named Templar kills look familiar. Around 9 to 12 high-profile targets, including John Pitcairn at Bunker Hill, Thomas Hickey, Charles Lee, and his own father, Haytham Kenway. That last one deserves a moment. He kills his own dad. Not by accident, not manipulation, he puts the blade in himself. Family dinners must have been awkward, but here's where Connor's numbers get weird. The American Revolution isn't a shadow war. It's musket volleys, bayonet charges, and cannon fire. Battles like Bunker Hill and Monmouth don't let you sneak by. You're hacking through redcoats with a tomahawk, chain-killing 3, 4, 5 soldiers in a single attack. A typical run puts Connor's body count somewhere in the hundreds or even over 1,000 just on foot. His combat system is built for group slaughter in a way Altair's never was. Then there's the Aquila. Every ship Connor sinks has a full crew, dozens of sailors gone. Finish all naval missions and you've wiped out hundreds more enemies, all off-screen underwater in burning hulls off Martha's Vineyard. Official kill counts match Altair's. But because of war, Connor's actual body count is on a whole different level. Altair was a scalpel, Connor was a scalpel strapped to a cannon, and yet somehow his grandfather was even worse, Edward Kenway. Edward Kenway isn't even an assassin for most of his game. He's a Welsh privateer chasing gold in the Caribbean who stumbles into the Assassin-Templar War because he killed the wrong guy and stole his robes. And yet somehow, this profit-motivated sailor has a body count that would make actual military commanders uncomfortable. His named Templar kills sit around a dozen. Standard fare. But here's where it gets absurd. Naval combat isn't a side activity in Black Flag. It's the entire game. Every ship you sink has a crew on it. A man-o'-war carries a crew in the hundreds. Players destroy these routinely for upgrade materials. A single completionist run involves sinking well over 100 vessels. Even if you assume half the crew survives each engagement, which is generous, considering you're firing broadside cannons into a wooden hull, you're looking at thousands of dead sailors attributed to one guy who just wanted to buy a mansion. Then there's the forts. Multiple forts across the map, each requiring you to sink every guard ship, destroy coastal defenses, then storm the ramparts and kill everyone inside. Dual swords, 4 flintlock pistols, and a combat system that rewards charging into fights. Edward doesn't wait. The man was basically a warship commander who occasionally did parkour, and he did all of this before he even believed in the creed. Which makes what comes next even more interesting, because his quartermaster eventually got his own ship, his own mission, and a very different reason to kill. Adewale. Here's the thing about Adewale. His list of named targets is tiny, single digits. A handful of slave ship captains, plantation overseers, and French colonial officials. On paper, that makes him one of the least prolific assassins in the franchise, but that number is a lie, because moment to moment, this man might be the most violent protagonist in the entire series. Freedom Cry gives you a compact map, a machete, and a blunderbuss that kills 3 people at once. That last detail is important. Ubisoft looked at the stealth mechanics they'd spent years refining and said, nah, walk up to them. The entire DLC mechanically rejects sneaking. You are supposed to be loud, you are supposed to be seen. Every plantation raid requires cutting through armed guards to free enslaved people. Every slave convoy means killing the escort. Every ship you board means clearing the deck. These aren't optional encounters. They are the game. Liberation is the core loop, and liberation requires a body count. What separates Adewale from everyone else isn't the number of people he kills. It's that the game never once asks you to feel conflicted about it. Connor questions his role. Edward kills for profit. Adewale kills a plantation overseer, and 20 people walk free. Every death is framed as emancipation. No ambiguity, no hand-wringing. Just a man with a blunderbuss pointed at the machinery of slavery. His kill density per hour probably exceeds most mainline protagonists, and yet nobody talks about him when ranking the deadliest assassins, which is a shame because if you think one man liberating an island is brutal, wait until you meet the assassin who switched sides and started hunting his own brotherhood. Shay Patrick Cormac. Let's get the elephant out of the room immediately. If you count the Lisbon earthquake, Shay Cormac is responsible for more deaths than every other protagonist on this list combined, and it's not even close. The assassins sent Shay to retrieve a precursor artifact beneath Lisbon in 1755. He disturbed it. The entire city collapsed. Tens of thousands died in the earthquake, the fires, and the tsunami that followed. Shay didn't mean to do it, but his hands were on the thing that caused it. That's a body count that makes naval warfare look like a bar fight. Now, setting Lisbon aside, his personal kill list is modest. High single digits, maybe low double digits of named targets. But every single one is an assassin, not some corrupt governor. These are mentors, brotherhood leaders, people who hold entire networks together. Each death collapses an entire regional operation. His air rifle turns him into something the franchise hadn't seen before, a predator hunting other predators. Assassins who are themselves stalking targets suddenly find Shay behind them. The hunter becomes hunted dynamic flipped completely on its head, but the real legacy isn't the numbers, it's the damage. Shay's campaign against the colonial brotherhood Brotherhood nearly wipes them off the map. That broken, barely functioning organization Connor inherits decades later, that's Shay's handiwork. He didn't just kill assassins, he killed the Assassin Brotherhood itself. But if you think turning on your own order is dark, wait until you meet a man whose greatest enemy was grief itself. Arno Dorian is the Schrodinger's cat of Assassin's Creed protagonists. He's simultaneously the most peaceful and one of the most violent assassins in the franchise, and which version you get depends entirely on whether you're good at video games. Here's the thing. Unity's black box assassination design is built around the fantasy of the perfect kill. Massive multi-entry environments, disguises, hidden routes, environmental opportunities, all so you can waltz in, put a blade in one specific Templar's neck, and ghost out like you were never there. Arno's canonical target list is fewer than a dozen elite assassinations, all members of Germain's inner circle. On paper, he's one of the cleanest operators in Brotherhood history, but revolutionary Paris had other plans. Unity City is the densest urban environment the series had built to that point. Massive crowds, heavily armed guards from multiple factions stacked on top of each other, restricted zones the size of entire city blocks. The game hands you a scalpel and drops you into a blender. One mistimed blend, and suddenly you're fencing 6 extremists in an alleyway, while 3 more climb down from the rooftops. A skilled player can finish Unity with a body count in the low dozens. Most players, high hundreds. Easy. The AI doesn't care about your stealth build. And surrounding all of this is a city already drowning in death. Guillotines dropping in public squares, mobs dragging people through streets. Arno navigates this apocalypse, but rarely causes it. He's a surgeon working inside a slaughterhouse. But if you think the gap between intention and body count is interesting with Arno, wait until you meet someone who never even pretended to care about stealth. Jacob Frye. Jacob Frye is the moment the series stops pretending. Every assassin before him operated in the shadows, pulling strings, whispering into the ear of history. Jacob walks into Victorian London, looks at the entire Templar power structure, and says, I'm going to build a gang and punch my way through all of it. Which is, not exactly what the Creed had in mind. Here's the thing about Jacob's kill count. His name targets roughly 8 to 10 Templar lieutenants, plus Crawford Starrick himself, each controlling a borough of London's industrial machine, aren't even the interesting part. The interesting part is everything in between. Because to reach those targets, Jacob doesn't sneak through a window and disappear. He liberates entire districts through gang wars, pitched battles, dozens of rooks crashing into dozens of blighters, while Jacob wades through the middle with brass knuckles and a cane sword, chain killing his way from one end of the street to the other. The combat system is built for extended brawls, knife strikes, knuckle combos, brutal finishers that flow from one enemy to the next like he's conducting an orchestra of broken jaws. Then you factor in the carriage chases where he's throwing guys off, moving vehicles, the train hijackings where entire cars get cleared out, the rooftop pursuits that end with someone falling 6 stories onto cobblestone. He's not an assassin operating within a war, he is the war. The first protagonist, whose primary mode of operation is overt populist violence rather than shadow conspiracy, a gang general with a hidden blade collecting dust in his pocket. But if you think Jacob's approach to London was messy, wait until you see how his sister handled the exact same city with an entirely different philosophy. Evie Frye, same city, same war, same targets. And yet Evie Frye might have the lowest body count of any protagonist in the entire franchise, which is wild because she's standing right next to Jacob while he's punching his way through half of London. Here's the thing about Evie. She shares most of her major canonical kills with Jacob. Crawford Starrick goes down with both twins present. The borough lieutenants fall through their combined efforts. But Evie has one unique kill that defines her entire philosophy, Lucy Thorne. A Templar obsessed with securing a piece of Eden, eliminated not through some chaotic gang brawl, but through careful infiltration and a single, precise strike. She kills to protect something, not to conquer territory. But here's where it gets interesting. Her entire skill tree is basically the game telling you please stop killing people. Invisibility enhancements, chameleon blending, knife throwing that lets you pick off one guard instead of fighting 12. A disciplined player can complete most of her missions killing only the primary target. One person walks in, one person dies, one person walks out. The community figured this out immediately. No Detection Challenge runs overwhelmingly use Evie as the default character, because she's mechanically built for surgical precision in a game that otherwise hands you brass knuckles and says go nuts. Narratively, she's framed as the true assassin sibling, the one who actually reads the Creed instead of using it as a coaster, and if we take the game's own characterization seriously, Evie probably killed fewer people in her entire London campaign than Jacob kills on a Tuesday. But if Evie represents the last whisper of the stealth-first assassin, then what comes next is the complete opposite. A man who didn't just kill targets. He built an entire brotherhood on the ashes of everyone who wronged him. Bayek of Siwa. Bayek is where the series stops pretending. Every protagonist before him operated within a structure that let you imagine the assassin was surgical, precise, minimal. Bayek doesn't get that luxury. Here's the thing. His canonical target list alone is larger than Altair's, Ezio's, and Connor's combined. Over 20 named Order of the Ancients members fall to his blade in the main story, and once you factor in side quest oppressors and bandit leaders, that number pushes toward 30. 30 personally significant kills before we even talk about the nameless thousands. And those nameless thousands, they're not optional. Origins introduced RPG leveling. You can't waltz into a high-level region and assassinate your target like it's 2007. You need experience. You need gear. You need to clear camps and fight through entire military installations just to keep pace. The game structurally demands that Bayek kill constantly. Then the loot system whispers in your ear. You scouted the fort with Senu, identified the captain, planned your stealth approach. Beautiful. Very assassin. But there are 4 more chests in there. A legendary weapon on the commander. So you don't leave, you clear the whole thing. Every guard, every patrol, every unlucky soldier who wandered back from his lunch break, and the backdrop is the Egyptian civil war. Cleopatra versus Ptolemy XIII. Caesar's legions making everything exponentially more violent. Military encampments on every riverbank. Roman fortifications on every hill. For thorough players, his body count reaches comfortably into the thousands. Bayek is the tipping point where the franchise structurally commits to mass combat as the primary means of progression. But if Bayek is the tipping point, the next entry doesn't just cross the line. It erases it entirely, hands the player a spear, and says, go fight an entire war. Cassandra. Cassandra is where the franchise stops pretending. Every protagonist before her exists within some kind of boundary. Altair has his 10 targets. Ezio has his decades of conspiracy. But Cassandra? Cassandra has infinity. The Cult of Cosmos alone gives her the longest canonical elite kill list in the entire franchise. Over 40 named members, organized into thematic branches, each one a unique individual with a face, a backstory, and a very specific reason to die. That's not a hit list, that's a phone book. Altair got 10 names and a pat on the back. Cassandra gets a conspiracy so large, it needs its own organizational chart. But the cultists aren't even the main source of her body count. Conquest battles are full-scale military clashes between Spartan and Athenian forces, and Cassandra can show up to either side whenever she feels like it. Each one involves her personally cutting down dozens of soldiers, and they're repeatable. They're designed to be farmed. The Peloponnesian War never ends mechanically. It just keeps generating bodies. Then there's the mercenary system, a persistent ladder of named adversaries constantly refreshing as she climbs the ranks. Every single one is a named individual who existed specifically for her to destroy. Add naval combat on top, sinking ships endlessly across the Aegean, each carrying a crew that simply ceases to exist. The fundamental difference between Cassandra and everyone before her is structural. Previous protagonists have a kill count. Cassandra has a kill rate. There is no ceiling. The war continues. The mercenaries respawn. The ships keep sailing. Her body count isn't a number, it's a function that keeps climbing as long as you keep playing. But if you think an endless Greek war produces bodies, wait until you meet a Viking who turned raiding into a lifestyle. Eivor Varen's daughter. Eivor is a Viking raider whose job description literally includes burning monasteries. She carries the hidden blade, sure, but let's be honest, it's more of an accessory at this point, like wearing a stethoscope to a demolition site. Her canonical target list is massive, several dozen Order of the Ancients members spread across England, plus lost Drengr duels, plus every regional arc antagonist she puts in the ground along the way. But here's the thing, that's just the political kills. River raids and monastery raids are a core repeatable mechanic. You need those resources to upgrade your settlement. Every single raid involves Eivor and her crew fighting through waves of Anglo-Saxon defenders. Siege battles form the climax of multiple arcs, with Eivor breaking gates, cutting through soldiers like she's harvesting wheat. This isn't assassination, this is warfare with an assassin's hood draped over it, and her combat style removes any remaining ambiguity. Dual-wielding axes, hammers, executing finishing moves so brutal they'd make Ezio flinch. The hidden blade is there, technically perfectly functional, quietly collecting dust while Ivor buries a Dane axe in someone's collarbone. And that's the punchline to this entire video. Altair had 11 surgical kills in the Holy Land. Eivor has thousands of raid casualties across England. That's not a difference in degree. That's a complete transformation of what the word assassin means in this franchise. From a single hidden blade in a crowd to a long ship full of warriors crashing into a riverbank. 15 years of evolution, and we ended up here. Which is, not ideal for the monasteries. The Colonial Brotherhood of Assassins is one of the most tragic stories in the entire franchise. Built from nothing, destroyed from within, and rebuilt by a man who had every reason to walk away. Today I'm breaking down the complete history of the Colonial Brotherhood, from its founding to its fall to its resurrection. And it starts with a man most people have never even heard of, the founding by John de la Tour. Around 1740, the French Brotherhood Council gave a man named John de la Tour a single mission: go to New France, establish an assassin network, and figure out what precursor sites were hiding across the colonial territories. He set up in Acadia and got to work, quietly building intelligence on ancient Isu locations scattered throughout the region. Not exactly glamorous, but the guy took it seriously. Then he met Achilles Davenport. De la Tour was a French-Canadian operative with deep knowledge of precursor sites. Davenport was a Caribbean-trained assassin with the combat skills to actually do something with that knowledge. The two basically said, yeah, we could build something real here. Not a French network or a British one. A unified brotherhood that ignored colonial borders entirely. By the mid-1740s, they'd formed a genuine partnership, tracking Isu artifacts and building contacts across the colonies. De la Tour brought the intelligence. Achilles brought the muscle. And along the way, Achilles met Abigail, who would become his wife. The entire emotional foundation of the Colonial Brotherhood was being laid alongside the strategic one. Then came the Siege of Louisbourg in 1745, and this is where de la Tour's story ends. With British forces closing in and Davenport still trying to escape with precursor documents, de la Tour attacked the British troops alone. One man against an army, buying time with his life. Before he died, he formally named Davenport as mentor and handed over his ceremonial robes. Here's the thing. His total presence in the lore is incredibly brief, but every single thing the Colonial Brotherhood became, every victory, every failure, all of it traces back to the decisions this one man made in a handful of years. He picked the right partner, found the right information, and died at exactly the right moment. But the man he chose to carry that torch, he's about to build an empire and then watch it burn to the ground. Achilles Davenport's leadership. Achilles Davenport didn't just lead the Colonial Brotherhood, he built it from nothing. Trained under the legendary Caribbean mentor Atabai himself, Davenport took the torch from the fallen John de la Tour in 1746 and established the Davenport homestead in Massachusetts as the Brotherhood's new headquarters. And then he got to work. By 1752, barely 6 years in, the man had assembled something terrifying. Forts, settlements, spy networks, gang operations, stretching from the river valley to the North Atlantic. The Colonial Brotherhood had become the most powerful assassin presence in all of colonial North America, which is, not bad for half a decade, and the recruits he pulled in were no joke. Liam O'Brien, inducted back in 1743, became his right hand. Hope Jensen, an orphaned thief, built criminal networks across New York like she was franchising them. Chevalier de la Vérendrye brought French military connections to the table, and then there was Shay Cormac, recruited around 1748 for his skills on the water. At the time, he seemed like a perfect fit. We'll get back to that. But here's where it gets complicated. Achilles lost his wife Abigail and his son Connor, and that grief didn't just change him, it rewired him. He became obsessed with using the precursor box and the Voynich manuscript to locate ancient structures called seismic temples. On paper, it looked like ambition. In practice, it was a man trying to fill a hole that couldn't be filled and dragging an entire brotherhood toward the edge of a cliff without realizing it. That's the tragedy of Achilles Davenport. Brilliant organizer, genuine visionary, built a golden age with his bare hands. But the moment his purpose shifted from protector to power seeker, the clock started ticking on everything he'd created, and those precursor sites he was so desperate to find, they're about to become the single biggest mistake in Brotherhood history: the search for the precursor sites. The Colonial Brotherhood wasn't just running around stabbing Templars. They had a bigger mission, one that would eventually destroy them from the inside out. And it all started with a box. The precursor box was an Isu device, a piece of ancient technology that, when paired with the Voynich manuscript, could project a global map showing the locations of first civilization temples scattered across the world. For the Brotherhood, this was the ultimate strategic asset, a literal treasure map to power that predated human civilization. Achilles and his leadership believed these sites contained pieces of Eden, artifacts that could tip the balance of the entire Assassin-Templar war permanently in their favor. Here's the thing, they were wrong. Not about the temples existing. Those were real. They were wrong about what the temples actually did. In 1751, the Saint-Domingue mentor François Macandal used the precursor box and manuscript to locate a temple near Port-au-Prince. He sent an operative named Vendredi to investigate. Vendredi reached the temple's core, disturbed its central component, and triggered a massive earthquake that leveled Port-au-Prince and killed thousands of people. Vendredi himself was caught in the destruction and never made it out, which is, not ideal. These weren't weapon vaults. They were seismic temples, part of a vast underground network built by the ISU to stabilize the Earth's crust. Think of them as geological support beams holding the planet together. You pull one out, the ground doesn't politely rearrange itself. It collapses violently on top of everyone. Now, this should have been the moment where the entire Brotherhood stopped, looked at the smoking crater where a city used to be, and said maybe we should not do that again. But they didn't. Achilles and the Brotherhood leadership chalked it up to natural causes. A coincidence. Bad luck. They had a map to god-level technology, and they weren't about to stop following it because of one earthquake, no matter how many people it killed. That failure of intellectual humility, that refusal to connect the dots when the dots were screaming at them, would cost the Brotherhood everything. Because Port-au-Prince wasn't the last temple they'd crack open, and the next one would be so much worse. The 1755 Lisbon earthquake. Achilles sent Shay to Lisbon, Portugal. The mission was simple: infiltrate an Isu complex hidden beneath the Carmo convent, locate what Davenport believed was a piece of Eden, and bring it home. Standard retrieval job. Nothing the Brotherhood hadn't done before. But when Shay reached the heart of the temple, he found something familiar. Too familiar. The structure was identical to the seismic temple in Port-au-Prince, the same one that had already caused an earthquake and killed thousands just 4 years earlier, and the Brotherhood knew about that disaster. They knew what had happened when the last person disturbed one of these sites. Shay followed his orders anyway. He removed the core component from its pedestal, and the thing immediately disintegrated in his hands, which is, not ideal. The entire complex began collapsing around him, and within minutes, the disturbance triggered an earthquake exceeding magnitude 8.5, one of the most destructive seismic events in recorded European history. Lisbon was leveled. Thousands of people were dead before the dust even settled. Churches, homes, entire neighborhoods, just gone. And Shay had to crawl out of the rubble knowing that he did that the Brotherhood told him to do that. He barely made it back to the homestead alive, and when he got there, he begged Achilles to stop. Stop searching for precursor sites. Destroy the Voynich manuscript. Never send another assassin into one of these temples again. His argument was about as straightforward as it gets. We just killed an entire city. Maybe we should stop doing the thing that kills entire cities. The Brotherhood's response? They didn't believe him. The entire leadership dismissed his eyewitness testimony and his moral objections as insubordination. Not a single senior assassin backed him up. Here's the thing, Shay's position wasn't radical. It wasn't even controversial. Protect the innocent. That's literally the foundation of the Assassin Creed. He was asking the Brotherhood to follow its own rules, and they treated him like a traitor for it. The organization that existed to defend free will and human life had just flattened a European capital and then criminalized the one guy who said maybe we shouldn't do that again. That's the moment the colonial Brotherhood sealed its own fate. They just didn't know it yet, because Shay wasn't going to let this go, and what he did next would make Lisbon look like a footnote. Shay Patrick Cormac's betrayal. Before Shay Cormac became the most dangerous enemy the colonial Brotherhood ever faced, he was one of its best. Between 1752 and 1754, Shay personally assassinated 3 high-ranking Templars: Lawrence Washington, Samuel Smith, and James Wardrop. He was the second best sailor in the entire colonial Brotherhood. The guy was a weapon, and he was pointed directly at the Templar Order. Then Lisbon happened. We already covered what went down in that seismic temple, but what matters here is what came after. Shay didn't just feel bad about Lisbon, he was destroyed by it. Thousands of people died because he followed orders, and when he came back begging the Brotherhood to stop chasing precursor sites, they told him to sit down and shut up. His conscience was treated like insubordination. So Shay made a choice. He attempted to steal the Voynich manuscript, not because he wanted power, but because he genuinely believed it was the only way to prevent another city from being leveled. The man was trying to save lives, and the Brotherhood tried to kill him for it. When Achilles discovered the theft, there was no conversation, no tribunal, no attempt to understand why one of their most loyal operatives had just committed the most desperate act of his life. They pursued Shay with lethal force. His former brothers hunted him across the colonies like an animal. Cornered, betrayed by the only family he'd ever known, Shay contacted Grand Master Haytham Kenway and offered his services to the colonial right. And here's where it gets truly tragic. Everything Shay knew about the Brotherhood, every safe house, every operative, every strategy, he handed all of it over. He didn't just switch sides, he became the single most devastating weapon the Templars had ever possessed. From 1757 to 1760, Shay systematically hunted down and killed his former colleagues, Kesegoas, Hope Jensen, Chevalier de la Vérendrye, even Adewale, the legendary Caribbean assassin who'd been fighting Templars since before Shay was born. He knew exactly how they thought, how they moved, where they'd hide. The thing that makes Shay so difficult to categorize is that he's not a villain who turned evil. He's a man whose conscience was punished. Every kill he made as a Templar was a former friend, and every one of those kills was preventable if the Brotherhood had just listened, if Achilles had just considered the possibility that the guy who watched Lisbon collapse had a point, but they didn't. And Shay didn't stop until there was almost nothing left to destroy. Which brings us to what happened when the Templars finally came for the homestead itself, the siege of the Davenport homestead. By 1760, the colonial Brotherhood was already dead. It just hadn't stopped breathing yet. The Arctic had taken everything. Liam O'Brien, Achilles' most loyal friend and the last real fighter the Brotherhood had left, was killed at a precursor vault buried in the frozen north. Shay Cormac put him down. And while Liam bled out on the ice, Haytham Kenway turned his attention to Achilles himself, shattering his legs so badly the man would never walk right again. But Haytham didn't kill him. He let Achilles live on one condition. The Brotherhood would abandon every single Isu temple search, effective immediately. No more precursor sites, no more artifacts, no more anything. Achilles accepted. What else was he going to do? For 3 years after that, the mentor lived in enforced purgatory at the Davenport homestead. Still alive, technically still an assassin, but forbidden from acting like one. The surviving members scattered like roaches when the lights come on. Pierre Balek fled all the way to France, haunted by what he'd witnessed during the Purge. The Templars had burned entire villages to the ground just for the chance of killing a single assassin hiding among the population. Balek saw that firsthand. He never forgot it, but the Templars weren't satisfied with a broken mentor and a handful of fugitives. They wanted extinction. In 1763, they got as close as anyone ever has. A full-scale assault hit the Davenport homestead. Every remaining assassin present was killed. Every single one. The only survivors were Achilles and Robert Faulkner, and even that wasn't guaranteed until Shay Cormac personally stepped in. Here's where it gets complicated. Shay, the man who had betrayed the Brotherhood, who had hunted his former brothers across the continent for years, asked Haytham Kenway to spare his old mentor's life, and Haytham agreed. But the terms were absolute. Achilles would live only if he abandoned his identity as an assassin forever. No rebuilding, no recruiting, no hope. Achilles accepted again, because again, what choice did he have? And so the once ambitious mentor of a continental brotherhood became a depressed, embittered recluse in a crumbling house. The homestead rotted around him, the paint peeled, the floorboards warped, and Achilles sat inside alone for 6 years. A man who had commanded networks stretching from Canada to the Carolinas, reduced to staring at walls and waiting to die. That image is one of the most quietly devastating moments in the entire franchise. No dramatic cutscene, no orchestral swell, just an old man and the ruins of everything he built. But if you think the Brotherhood story ends in that crumbling house, you haven't been paying attention. Because what the Templars did to the assassins across the rest of the colonies was somehow even worse. The Great Purge of the Colonial Brotherhood. Let's pull back and look at the full picture, because what happened to the Colonial Brotherhood between 1757 and 1763 wasn't a war. It wasn't a series of unfortunate events. It was an extermination. Haytham Kenway didn't just want to beat the assassins, he wanted to erase them. every safe house, every recruit, every supply line, every ally, every scrap of infrastructure that allowed the Brotherhood to function as an organization. The Templars went after all of it, systematically, methodically, and with a level of precision that should have been impossible for an outside force. But here's the thing, they weren't working with outside intelligence. Shay Cormac knew everything. He knew the names, he knew the faces, he knew which operatives worked which routes, which safe houses were active, which harbors the Brotherhood used to resupply. He knew their training methods, their communication protocols, their individual habits and weaknesses. Every single advantage the Colonial Brotherhood had built over a decade of careful expansion became a vulnerability overnight, because the one person who understood the entire machine was now working for the people trying to destroy it, and destroy it they did. Between 1757 and 1760, Shay personally hunted down and killed Kesegoase, Hope Jensen, Chevalier de la Vérendrye, and even Adewale, the legendary Caribbean assassin who had survived decades of conflict only to die at the hands of a former brother. These weren't random kills. These were surgical removals of leadership, each one collapsing another section of the network. The Templars didn't just assassinate people, they burned safe houses. They dismantled recruitment pipelines. They made it impossible for the Brotherhood to train new members, coordinate operations, or even communicate between cells. By 1760, the Arctic Temple confrontation had left Liam O'Brien dead and Achilles Davenport permanently crippled. By 1763, the final assault on the homestead killed every remaining assassin except Achilles and Robert Faulkner. That's it. That's what was left. A crippled old man, a ship captain, and a handful of scattered survivors who had abandoned their identities just to stay alive. The most powerful assassin organization in the Western Hemisphere reduced to nothing in 6 years, which is, not ideal. But what made the Purge truly devastating wasn't just the body count, it was the totality. The Templars didn't leave behind a weakened Brotherhood that could recover in a few years. They left behind a void. No leadership structure, no training infrastructure, no institutional knowledge being passed down. The Brotherhood didn't just lose the war, it ceased to exist as a functioning entity, and that void would persist for years until the 7 Years' War reshaped the entire continent and created conditions nobody saw coming. The 7 Years' War aftermath. The Templars won. That's the short version. The long version is so much worse because the Templars won and then immediately started losing, and they did it to themselves. The 7 Years' War, known in the colonies as the French and Indian War, ran from 1754 to 1763 and reshaped the entire continent. But for the Assassins and Templars, it wasn't just a war between empires, it was the backdrop for everything. Every assassination, every betrayal, every burned safe house during the Great Purge happened while musket fire echoed across the frontier. Here's how the sides broke down. The Colonial Brotherhood aligned with French interests and indigenous peoples, defending communities that stood to lose everything under British expansion. The Templars, under Haytham Kenway, backed Britain, not because they cared about King George. Haytham's logic was brutally simple. If Britain dominated North America, the Templars could use British authority to enforce centralized control over every colony on the continent. One empire, one hierarchy, one order pulling the strings, and it worked. Britain's victory was comprehensive. France ceded all its North American territory east of the Mississippi through the Treaty of Paris in 1763. The Brotherhood's allies were gone. Their networks among French settlers and indigenous nations were scattered. The Templars controlled the winning side of a continental war while simultaneously finishing the Great Purge. On paper, total Templar victory. But here's where it gets complicated. Fighting a war across an entire continent is not cheap. Britain had racked up massive debts, and somebody had to pay. So Parliament looked at the colonies they'd just spent a fortune defending and said, "You're welcome. Here's your tax bill, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, new duties, new restrictions." And the colonists, who had just watched their neighbors die in a war they didn't start, were not exactly thrilled about being squeezed by a government that gave them zero representation. The resentment created something the Templars never anticipated, a unified colonial identity built entirely on resistance to the very British authority they'd spent a decade strengthening. That's the irony that makes this whole period fascinating. The Templars engineered a British victory to consolidate control over North America. But that victory generated the exact conditions for colonial rebellion. the taxes, the overreach, the growing sense that the colonies were being exploited rather than governed. All of it traced directly back to war debts from a conflict the Templars helped win. They planted the seeds of their own defeat and didn't even realize it. The American Revolution, the very conflict that would resurrect the Brotherhood they'd just finished destroying, was a direct consequence of the Templars' greatest triumph, which is, not ideal. But the revolution needed a spark, and more importantly, it needed an assassin, one who happened to be the son of the man who built the colonial right in the first place. Connor Kenway's training. Picture this: a teenage Mohawk warrior, barely old enough to shave, standing on the doorstep of a rotting manor house in the middle of nowhere, Massachusetts. Inside is a crippled old man who hasn't spoken to another human being in 6 years. This is the moment the colonial brotherhood comes back from the dead. Ratan Naketon was born on April 4th, 1756, and his parents read like a bad joke. His father was Hatham Kenway, Grand Master of the Colonial Templars. His mother was Kanyedi.io, a Kanyan Kahaka warrior who wanted nothing to do with Hatham's world. Connor grew up in the Mohawk village of Kanataseton, completely unaware of his father's identity and completely unaware of the war between assassins and Templars. In 1760, Charles Lee's forces burned the village. Connor was 4 years old. His mother didn't make it out. That single event carved a path through the next decade of his life. Guided by the Isu entity Juno and advice from his tribal elder Oya Nair, Connor eventually learned that the tools he needed to protect his people existed outside his village. Around 1769, he made the journey to the Davenport homestead to find the last assassin in the colonies. What he found was a ruin. Achilles Davenport was crippled, depressed, bitter, and utterly done with the brotherhood that had gotten everyone he loved killed. He told Connor to leave, multiple times. The old man had watched his entire organization get systematically dismantled. Training some kid to go die the same way everyone else did was not on his to-do list. But Connor didn't leave, and eventually Achilles broke. Here's the detail that gets me. When Achilles finally agreed to train him, he gave Ratanhanake-tun a new name, Connor, after his own dead son. A grieving old man names his last student after the child he buried. That's not a tactical decision. That's a man deciding to hope again, which is honestly the bravest thing anyone does in this entire story. And Achilles didn't just teach him how to stab people, colonial politics, financial management, the philosophical foundations of the creed itself. He'd seen what happened when the Brotherhood operated, without understanding the world around it, and he was determined not to repeat that mistake. By 1773, the investment paid off. When Templar William Johnson attempted to purchase Iroquois lands, including Connor's home territory, Connor tracked him to Boston entirely on his own initiative. No orders from Achilles, no grand strategy session. He identified the threat, assessed the situation, and moved. That's not a student following instructions. That's a leader making decisions. The Colonial Brotherhood, which had been literally one broken man in a collapsing house, now had a future. But having a future and surviving long enough to use it are two very different things, especially when the revolution is about to explode and the Templars have infiltrated the Continental Army itself. The Battle of Monmouth, June 28, 1778, New Jersey. Over 100 degrees on the battlefield, soldiers collapsing from heat stroke before a single shot was fired. And somehow this wasn't even the worst part of the day. Here's the situation. The British Army under General Clinton was retreating from Philadelphia toward New York, dragging a baggage train 12 miles long through the New Jersey countryside. Washington saw an opportunity to hit them while they were strung out and vulnerable. The plan was simple. Major General Charles Lee would take a 5,000-man vanguard, slam into the British rear guard before Clinton could consolidate. Washington's main body would follow behind, ready to reinforce once Lee had the British pinned. Simple enough. Except Charles Lee had zero intention of making it work. Lee's advance was hesitant from the start, poorly coordinated, indecisive, the kind of military leadership that looks less like caution and more like sabotage. Instead of pressing the attack while the British were stretched thin, Lee allowed his forces to stall, giving British General Cornwallis enough time to wheel around and launch a devastating counterattack. What was supposed to be an American pursuit turned into an American retreat. 5,000 Continental soldiers, the best Washington had, on the verge of being routed in open field, and then Lee tried to finish the job. Mid-battle, with his own forces already buckling, Lee attempted to order a full general retreat. Not a tactical withdrawal, a complete retreat that would have exposed the entire vanguard to destruction and potentially collapsed the Continental Army's fighting capacity in a single afternoon. This wasn't incompetence anymore. This was a Templar operative trying to hand the British a war-ending victory on a silver platter. Connor was already on the field. His role wasn't to command battalions. It was something far more precise. He was there to neutralize Lee's treachery at the exact moment it mattered most. Connor's intervention prevented Lee's retreat order from taking effect, ensuring the Continental forces held their positions long enough for Washington himself to arrive and personally rally the troops. Washington, furious at what he found, took direct command and organized the defensive line that halted the British advance. The battle ended in a tactical draw, but the strategic implications were enormous. The Continental Army had stood toe-to-toe with British regulars in open combat and it held because one assassin, operating within the chaos of a major engagement, made a single precisely timed intervention that prevented catastrophe. This is what the rebuilt Brotherhood looked like in action, not shadows and hidden blades in dark alleys. A trained operative embedded in the most consequential moments of the revolution, making decisions that altered the course of battles. Connor didn't win Monmouth, Washington did that, but Washington only got the chance because Connor made sure the army was still standing when he arrived. But preventing Lee's betrayal at Monmouth wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the end for Charles Lee himself. The death of Charles Lee. Charles Lee was, by every measurable standard, the most dangerous Templar left standing in the colonies. Not the most powerful, the most dangerous. Because Lee didn't operate in the shadows like a typical Templar agent. He wore a Continental Army uniform. He held rank. He had George Washington's ear, and he used every ounce of that access to sabotage the revolution from the inside. In 1776, Lee was directly involved in a Templar plot to assassinate George Washington. Not metaphorically, an actual assassination carried out through a Templar operative named Thomas Hickey planted inside Washington's personal guard. Connor stopped it by killing Hickey, but the fact that the Templars got that close to ending the revolution with a single knife tells you everything about how embedded Lee's network was. Lee spent years undermining Continental military operations from within, ordering retreats in the middle of winnable battles, feeding intelligence to the British through Templar channels. He wasn't a spy in the traditional sense. He was a general actively trying to lose a war while pretending to fight it. Connor pursued him across multiple years. Every time he got close, Lee slipped away. By 1781, Connor's hunt led him to Fort George, but Lee wasn't waiting for him there. Hatham Kenway was. Connor's own father had been shielding Lee the entire time. The assault ended with Connor killing Hatham in combat, his own father, to get to the man standing behind him, and Lee still escaped. Connor tracked him to a tavern in Monmouth called The Last Drink, and what happened inside is one of the most iconic scenes in the entire franchise, not because of the action, because of the silence. Lee was sitting at a table, wounded, exhausted. He looked up at Connor, and instead of running, instead of fighting, he poured 2 drinks, slid one across the table. Connor sat down and took it. 2 men who had spent years trying to kill each other, sharing a drink at the end of everything. No speeches, no final villain monologue, just 2 exhausted people acknowledging that the war between them was over. Lee gave Connor a slight nod, not defiance, not surrender. A quiet recognition that Connor had earned this. Connor drew his hidden blade and stabbed Lee through the heart. There's no triumph in that moment. No swelling music, just a man dying slowly in a tavern while the person who killed him sits beside him, equally broken by everything it took to get there. Lee's death ended Templar influence over American military affairs. Within weeks, Yorktown would fall, and the war would effectively be over. But Connor didn't celebrate. He walked out carrying the weight of every person he'd lost, every compromise he'd made, and every year he'd spent chasing a man who turned out to be just as tired as he was. He'd killed his own father just to reach this moment, and the moment felt like nothing. And with Lee gone, the Templars shattered, and the revolution won, Connor faced a question somehow harder than all of it. What do you do with a brotherhood that barely exists anymore? The rebuilding of the Brotherhood. After the revolution ended, Connor didn't celebrate. He got to work. The Davenport homestead had spent years rotting. The Brotherhood had spent even longer doing the same. Connor's job was to fix both, and he started with his hands. He physically restored the homestead, rebuilt its infrastructure, and transformed it from a monument to failure back into a functioning headquarters. But bricks and timber were the easy part. The hard part was people. Here's the thing. Connor's recruitment strategy looked nothing like what Achilles had built decades earlier. Achilles had recruited elites, Military officers, established operatives with connections and pedigree. Connor went the opposite direction. He recruited common people, frontier settlers who'd survived the war with nothing but calluses and conviction, indigenous warriors from his own Kanien'kehá:ka nation, veterans who'd bled for independence and weren't about to let someone else decide what that independence looked like. He didn't want a hierarchy, he wanted a community, and it worked. In the years following the revolution, the Brotherhood had become genuinely cosmopolitan in a way Achilles never could have imagined. Its ranks included Aveline de Grandpré, the Louisiana assassin who brought an entire southern network with her, Boston apprentices like Duncan Little and Clipper Wilkinson, ordinary people turned into something extraordinary. The Brotherhood's reach now extended into Louisiana, across the eastern seaboard, and throughout the new United States. It was bigger than what Achilles lost, but more importantly, it was different, because that's the real point. Connor didn't rebuild the old Brotherhood, he built a new one. The version Achilles created was powerful, but it was also rigid enough to shatter when pressure hit. Connor's version was built on flexibility, on shared principle rather than centralized authority. It was messier, less elegant, but it bent instead of breaking. Achilles Davenport died peacefully in his sleep in September 1781 at approximately 71 years of age. He'd spent 6 years alone in a decaying house, convinced everything he'd dedicated his life to had been erased. Then a Kanien'kehá:ka kid showed up at his door and proved him wrong. Achilles got to watch the Brotherhood come back. Not the way he'd built it, not the way he'd imagined it, but alive, breathing, growing. The colonial Brotherhood survived, not because it stayed the same. It survived because one person was willing to tear up the blueprint and start over, and an old man who'd lost everything got to close his eyes, knowing it wasn't for nothing. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.